to our first Infrastructure Operations Committee in COVID-19 world of life in the land of lockdown. I'm happy for you to use either, oopsie, just a minute, just organise my screen a bit better. Either use the blue electronic hands or your real hands. I don't mind which.
Just testing.
Testing your real hands. I do have to squish my screen up quite a bit, so I just want to make sure. Oh no, that's not going to work. Okay, let's. Just because I've got open documents on my laptop, don't worry about using the blue hands. Oh, Dave is who we're missing. Just because I've closed down that screen now, so just use your physical hand, and if you just hold it up for a couple of seconds. I'm keeping a run sheet, so you can. I'll just give a nod even if someone's talking, and you can put your hand down. That will make life a little bit easier. Where are we? Okay, so and we'll also obviously do voting on the hands. I'll call out those for and against, and Rebecca will do what she does in terms of calling the vote on each item. If you're not talking, please remember to keep your device on mute. I'll keep mine open at all times. And obviously, we are all very well aware that the government's making a very important announcement at 1 o'clock. And I know we'll all be wanting to hear what level 3 and level 2, the details around that will look like. So if we're still going, it's good to be finished by then, but if we are still going, we'll break for lunch at 1 o'clock so we can all tune in, and I know staff are eager to find out the details on that. And we'll also stop for a bit of a 5 or 10 minute morning tea break as well. Norm, I was just saying, don't use because I've got a split screen today, don't use the blue hands, just raise your hand and I'll keep a speaking order. I'll just nod when I've seen your hand. All right, so we'll get on to it. I've got for apologies, I've got for lateness, Councillor Naidu-Rolfe, Mayor Southgate and Councillor Hamilton for partial. He has other council business meetings to attend.
And Councillor McPherson, I think there's heavy traffic on River Road.
Okay, and Councillor McPherson for lateness. So I'll move it be received by Councillor Bunting. All those in favour, raise your hands. Any against? It's probably an easy one. Thank you. That's passed. Right, confirmation of the agenda. There are no changes to the agenda, and thank you, Rebecca, for sending out the run sheet this morning. So I'll move that the agenda be received, seconded by Deputy Mayor Taylor. All those in favour? It's going to be an easy one, I'm assuming. Any against? No, that's carried. Thank you. Right, there's no public forum today.
Apologies too, but Councillor O'Leary, we have just received a very late public forum item. I have just literally circulated it now, just in regards to the City Safe Suburban Response Team. So that came through at about 9:30. It's just come through. I've spoken to the submitter or the presenter, and they didn't wish to speak. To be
okay. When we get to that item, elected members and Mangai, Norm, I'll stop and we can have a couple of minutes to read that. I see it's quite a long email from Rebecca Graham from Parents of Vision Impaired Children. Okay, did I move the agenda? Yes, we did that. Any declarations of interest? Councillor Forsyth?
It's not a declaration of interest, but it's just a question around receiving late items, and admittedly it's a public forum, but are there any, is there any framework around that, or can people just submit right up to the meeting?
They can. I mean, just like in the chamber, they can just rock up and enter the public forum.
Great,
yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you. All right, so we'll move on to item 5, elected members, which is page 6, and this is the confirmation of this committee's minutes for the 27th of February. There were a small couple of editing errors that Rebecca fixed overnight, but other than that, I can confirm that those minutes are an accurate record. Is there anything anybody wanted to raise for accuracy from the minutes? No? Okay, so I'll move that the minutes be received, seconded by Councillor Bunting. All those in favour, raise your hands. Raise your hands in the air. Any against? It's an easy one too. That's carried. Thank you. All right, we're moving on to the Chair's report, page 14. This is fairly straightforward actually. Just on page 14, committee members, I just wanted to add to the recommendation B. So A is to receive the report. And the recommendation B, given that we're in a COVID world right now and revenue for parking has stopped, I wanted to just change, rather than have a date to be deferred to the 26th of May, I think that that's probably a bit too close and probably a bit of crystal ball gazing. I've just wanted to change that to be deferred to a future meeting as soon as practicable. So if everyone's okay with that, Councillor Petco, you're on mute.
Yeah, right. Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to raise with that my understanding is that the trial ends on the 30th of June. So we will need to have some sort of report, I would suspect, before the 30th of June, if in order to either renew it or decide whether or not it's going, whether or not the free parking trial will continue. So I just wonder whether having some sort of date there might be useful in terms of making sure that that we stay in the appropriate timeline.
Look, I'm not going to die in a ditch over it. I just think we just don't know what it's going to look like, and we may end up coming back on the 26th of May with the same report as we've got here, which is to defer. But look, either way, it's fine by me. If you want to leave a date in there, we'll leave a date.
My preference would be to leave it there, and let's review that date if we need to, or extend that date if we need to.
All right, leave it there. Okay, so I'll move the Chair's report as is, and the report seconded. Councillor Petco raised his hand first. All those in favour?
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any against? Right, that's carried. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to item
7.
7. Yep. Okay, so this is the contract for the Puketi 3 wastewater treatment plant, and Eva Lisa, you're going to take the lead on this one.
Chris.
Oh, Chris, you're going to there. I couldn't see you.
Yep, so I was just going to say that this is a report for Chris Allen. So
Okay.
Chris is on the line and
Right.
he's going to take away and talk through this report for you.
Great, thanks. Over to you, Chris.
Okay.
Morena, councillors, Mangai Norm. I've also got on the line Syria and Adam, who are our project managers, who are there to answer any questions if we get into detail. So this report relates to cost increases in the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. Just to make a note, it does not include any impacts relating to the COVID-19 situation. So we are bringing a report to the next council meeting across our portfolio of contracts to update council on that. So the report seeks an increase in the approved contract sum as set out in recommendation 26. So 2 unforeseen causes, which were contamination through asbestos and unsuitable soil conditions. In paragraph 17.
Sorry, Chris, you're cutting out. Try, and now you're on mute.
Madam Chair, can I just, advise Rebecca that Councillor McPherson trying to get into the meeting?
Sorry, councillors,
I've let you know. Thank you, Councillor Gallagher.
Connection.
Yeah, you're cutting in and out, Chris.
Can you just tell me how much you heard of what I said?
No, because we didn't hear it.
May pay to turn your video off, Chris. That might help with your broadband width.
Yeah, he lives out in the sticks, doesn't he?
Yeah.
So,
No, all we heard was so.
Hey, Chris, it's better to dial in on phone rather than go through your connection.
Ironic.
Should we also bring a paper back to this committee on the rollout of ultra-fast fibre into the sticks?
Impact of homeschooling.
Yeah, you're talking, Chris, but you're on mute. And he's an engineer, but like you, Eva Lisa.
He's no, I'm pleased I'm not as technologically deprived as he is.
Okay, maybe while Chris.
Here he comes in. He's coming in on his iPad.
Sorry, I've just switched to my iPad. I've lost my connection.
Right.
So,
okay, we can hear you. We can hear you.
So,
yeah.
I'm not sure how much you heard, but I'll probably start again. So
good idea.
So this report relates to cost increases in the wastewater treatment plant upgrade. So it does not include for any impacts from the COVID-19 situation. So look, we are bringing a report to council later in the month with the portfolio of contracts and some of the impacts on that. So this report seeks an increase in the approved contract sum as set out in recommendation 26, and it relates largely to two unforeseen circumstances, namely asbestos and unforeseen soil conditions. So just pointing out to councillors in paragraph 17, when we awarded the contract in September 2018, we actually identified that these risks were there and that we hadn't allowed for them. And if they eventuated, we would come back to council to seek an increase in the approved contract sum, and we'd look to fund that through balancing the capital program. So as expected, the risks have eventuated and we're now facing these extra costs. So in terms of managing the costs within the capital portfolio, we've set out in the report in paragraphs 26, 27, our proposal to manage it within the treatment plant program. So previously we'd come to council and with a report to join the two treatment plants together into one program of works, the water treatment plant upgrade and the Puketi treatment plant upgrade over the next 5 years, and to treat them as one funded package and to do complete works in a priority order between those two plants. So councillors, I'm happy just to take any questions now on the report. Unfortunately, okay. I can't see the report.
No, that's okay. I've got Mark and then Councillor Petco.
Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Bunting.
Oh, I'm unmuted. Oh, great. Yeah, great. No dramas. Thanks, Chris. So this is almost a 4 mil up spend. Is this, when we saw those eye-watering graphs the other day, this might be one for Richard too. Is this budgeted into those?
So what we're proposing to do is, like, the report is not asking for any extra funding to the 10-year plan. We're managing it as part of the program of funded works for the two treatment plants. So this proposal does not increase our capital budget.
So it's within budget, basically.
It's managed within the capital program. So so that was the indication we gave when we let the contract, that if these risks eventuated, we would look to manage it within the funded capital program. And in particular, right, we're proposing to manage it within the treatment plant program.
Okay. And you mentioned that you, in 2018, you had a look at it and you realised the soil was unstable and you realised the asbestos was there, but didn't anticipate that this would happen, or am I right in that, or have I misheard that?
Yeah, no. So when we let the contract, if you go back to the report, we had a view that there may be asbestos and there may be unsuitable ground conditions. So we identified that risk, but we specifically said we hadn't allowed for that risk in the approved contract sum, and that we would come back to council if those risks eventuated to get an increase in the approved contract sum, and that if we did come back, we would manage those costs within our capital portfolio.
Okay, thanks. I'll let others have a crack. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Petco, then I've got Councillor Thompson and Mungai Norm. So Councillor Petco.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for a good, easy report to read too. Just in terms of balancing the capital program, two parts to the question, I guess. Does it mean that some other projects within the wastewater and the drinking water programs will miss out somewhere along the 10-year plan? And the second part to the question is, you know, when we develop the 10-year plan, do we provide for the potential contingencies of a $4 million cost overrun as we've got in this case?
Okay, a number of questions there.
I thought there was two, but
yep. So it's our expectation at this point in time that we would deliver all of the scope that we expected out of the 2 treatment plant upgrades. We will only know that when we get to the point of putting the next contract on the market, which is for the water treatment upgrade. So if you look at the report, and I think it's probably paragraph 27, it indicates there's about $20 million of budget allocated for the water treatment plant upgrade that we anticipated.
Yep.
So we've already completed some components of the water treatment plant upgrade, most notably the Southern Reservoir water pipe, which is intimately linked with the water treatment plant upgrade. So it's our expectation that we will still complete the scope within the budget for the 2 plants, but we'll only truly know that when we go to the market for the scope of the next of the water treatment plant upgrade, which is work that's scheduled ahead of us.
Okay, thank you. And you may not be able to answer this question, but have you got any sort of indications at the moment in terms of what COVID-19 is potentially going to cost us in terms of, say, and using this contract as an example, what the increased costs might be? I mean, you know, are we looking at a lot more than the 4.5? Is it 4 million? I think the extra funding required. Are you signaling that 4 million? And I know there's another contract further ahead on the agenda. Are we looking at, you know, potentially significant increases when we come out of the COVID-19 shutdowns or the impact of what we're having at the moment?
That's a difficult question to answer. I could only give you my view at the moment, an emerging view, and the costs will be reasonably significant, but for this contract, not in that order. So I don't expect they'll be in the order of $4 million for this one particular contract. So I think they'll be reasonably significant, but look, we're still working through that with our contractors, so that the matters are quite complex and the contractual claims haven't arrived yet. So, you know, once they arrive, we'll sort of be able to judge the quantum of those and our view on the validity of those claims. What is unknown to everyone in New Zealand is moving out of level 4 into level 3 and the impact on our contracts. So they will, my expectation or as we move into level 3, I'm hopeful that our contract will be able to commence, but they will be subject to huge strict guidelines in terms of social distancing and how do you undertake some contracts and comply with those guidelines. So yeah, it's very just uncertain at the moment, Councillor.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Thompson.
Thanks. Hi, Chris. Just following on from Councillor Robb's question there. So to clarify the extra costs that we're likely to see with a lot of these contracts, they're likely to come from the different requirements around alert levels and having to change the way that we work, or where are you seeing some of the extra costs kind of arise from as some specific examples?
So in a generic sense, the emerging view, where I'm in a public forum as well, because there's some negotiation to go with contractors. But the emerging view is that contractors, through no fault of their own and through no fault of ours either as principal to the contract, have had to close up the sites. So it's very likely that the costs to close up the sites and monitor the sites through level 4 would be a valid variation in entitlement to costs to do that. I think an entitlement also to remobilise would be an entitlement, and then the disrupted working environment through level 3 may be an entitlement as well. And then there are issues around extensions of time for the contract. Extension of times can come with time-related costs or not time-related costs. So those are some of the areas of negotiation to come. So that's a general answer to all of our contracts and the likely approach that we would need to take.
To what extent do we share those risks and costs?
Yep, so I think that's a really good question and really insightful question, because that's what's so unique about this situation. It's not really the fault of the contractor, it's not really the fault of the principal, which is us. So there is some sharing of costs between the two parties to the contract, but also government. So government have a number of packages designed to help out in these situations as well. So it's very likely that our contracts would move into a negotiated outcome that just meets and considers fairness and equity to all three parties.
Okay, cool, thank you. Last thing was just in terms of that Wastewater water treatment plant, it's forecast to cost less than originally budgeted, but was that included in capital savings, the $90-something million target for capital savings, or? No,
absolutely not. That funding allocation will be ring fenced to deal with the water treatment upgrade.
Yeah, cool, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Mangai Norm.
Yep, kia ora tātou. I just want to acknowledge there's lots of Māori words in this report. You can see that all the titles have been modified, or the Māori language has been added there. So I just want to make that acknowledgement first. Second, in regards to, I suppose, the COVID, there's been some science around the illness and how it spreads through our byproducts, which gets treated at these plants. And I suppose that conversation's been had. But Chris, I just want to make a point on the cultural points that have been raised. We know that there's been some breaches in the past and the impacts on Te Ture Whaimana, or the river vision and strategy. I think noting that there's been a breach, what's the environmental recourse that's been had with that. But what would be good for the councillors is that in the cultural issues or risk or considerations, engagement with Waikato Tāne and Te Hao Te Whenua Kirikiriroa, that standard practice, what would be good to know is actually what has been discussed within those meetings and what are the key outliers or the key points or key issues that have been identified and nullified. So, did you hear that, Chris?
Yes, yep. My brain's thinking of how to answer it. Like I know, yeah.
Yeah, only because throughout the reports you'll see the cultural consideration. There's a couple of lines that say that engagement with iwi has happened, and that's cool. But what's important for us is actually what are those key points that have been raised, and how have they been addressed, and are there any outliers that we could participate in as well?
So, look, my answer to that, Mungai Norm, is probably the scope of this report. Like
Yep.
the scope of this report is an increase to contract sum to deliver some agreed works. So engagement with iwi happened, several years ago about the scope of this work and the upgrade to the treatment plant, which is around capacity and compliance, like improving our compliance and improving the outcome for the environment, as well as our ability to deal with growth. So when we presented the business case in 2015 through the development to 2017, that's where the engagement with the iwi came in terms of what we were building. Like the scope of this report is the cost has increased. And I think the third part to my answer is that we operate under resource consents. The resource consent for that plant has got 8 years to run, and that's not a long time in terms of getting a great outcome in terms of our next consent for the plant. And that is why we're so actively involved in the Three Waters sub-regional work and some of our team in the organisation leading that work with a best for river outcome in terms of the next treatment plant upgrade, or indeed how we collectively across the region deal with our wastewater requirements in a collective fashion. So iwi is right at the top of every single table in those sub-regional discussions at a iwi and hapu and manu whenua level.
Yep, just one point. Yep, totally agree. This is about numbers and contracts, and I suppose it might be more prudent at a briefing type scenario where some of those details could be raised, so as not to sort of consume too much of these meeting times at this level.
Yeah, we have some significant briefings coming up for the Metro Spatial Plan and Hamilton Auckland Corridor and the Three Waters in particular. So offline, I'll talk to you, Mungai Norm, just to make sure that they are on your radar and in your diary to have that opportunity.
I can also pick it up from with governance as well. I think you raised a good point in giving some background and context. Chris, I understand exactly what you're saying in terms of the scope of this particular report, but you did give us more information around the background that could have been included. Mungai Norm, I'll look to make sure that the governance has a chat to you around expectations, because I agree with you.
Kia ora.
Councillor Forsyth, and then Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Chris, for your report. And thank you too for the foresight and warning in the early days when you took the contract on, saying that these are potential risks and we'll deal with them when we get to them. So it's a good heads-up position for councillors. But my question around that is, and I hope it's not too operational a question, but when those risks were identified, what sort of depth of I suppose further analysis did you go to? So point is, you made the assessment, okay, there's a potential asbestos risk here. Is that the extent of it, or do you try and quantify it or find out what the greater potential of that risk is and how much it's going to cost, or do you just deal with that when you start digging and having a look?
Councillor, that's a good question, and I'm not going to be able to give a detailed answer on that. And I think the two gentlemen I've got to support me weren't around at that time either. I'd probably have to go back to give a proper answer back to the people who were involved in 2015 as we were developing this report. My only recollection was that there was some knowledge that there may be asbestos contamination in the treatment plant. Now, what I can't answer is what investigations we did to dig holes to determine that, which I think is the basis of your question. So, yeah. So sorry, I just can't give a detailed answer to that.
I could potentially answer it if you like, Chris.
Okay, Adam Donaldson, our project manager.
So I was actually the operations manager at the time. So Councillor Forsyth, I was not directly involved in the project. However, I did have, I guess, an oversight of the risks at the treatment plant at the time. So I think paragraph number 18 captures your question quite well, and it effectively, the further investigations, we actually brought in a number of a bit of expertise and consultants to provide management guidance on the extent of the contamination. Mm-hmm. So not only that, but there was also grounds to put the project or elements of the project on hold, which of course added costs. So we wanted to get a really good picture of the nature of the contamination as well as the extent, but also how we could best manage it. And that really contributed to the additional costs and time as a result.
Thank you. So that was done at the time of the initial contract, yes?
This was very soon after the contract was first let.
So the contract's been let, and then you start to do some more digging around. Is that what how I understand it?
So the consultants were engaged prior to the physical work starting. So the management planning was starting before, what had been carried out prior to the work started, and the extent was then discovered as construction got underway.
Okay, so that was after the contract was let.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Look, it's operational, but I think from a governance point of view, it would be really handy to understand, have a bit more of an idea of what those risks might be before we go to contract, because it's quite an unknown when you're saying, well, we can identify a risk, but actually how long's a piece of string? It could be anything. And then once the contract is let, then you start digging around, and then you have much more of a clearer scope of what it is that you're working with. So when it comes back to us, I would like more information, just other than, well, we think there could be asbestos and here's a heads up that it could cost more money. Leading on from that, and the asbestos is a very real risk in our city. Do we have an idea of any other potential sites? Do we have that sort of intel, or do we just deal with that as we go?
So look, my answer to that, and I take the points that you're making, Councillor, and they go back to an improvement in our reporting several years ago when we let the contract and dimensioning.
Chris, can you put your phone on silent?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure that out, actually.
Isn't there a button on the side?
Everyone's trying to text me and give me some good answers.
No doubt.
Put my phone away. Stop texting me, everybody. So I lost my train of thought. So look, yeah, we absolutely do have asbestos around the city. So we've had a major problem on our Waiari Cobham Drive as well, asbestos. But in speaking to your point, when we are looking to progress a project, we do take site investigations, and contaminated soil is one of the things we look for. So we probably through records, but sometimes through drilling holes and trying to characterise soils and etc. So sometimes we find it through the little holes we dig. Sometimes we don't. So it is a risk that's probably common to all of our contractors to at least consider through records, anecdotal evidence, and physical investigation sometimes.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for that detail. And yeah, look, as I mentioned, it possibly teeters towards an operational kind of comment, but as I said, it's more about having the detail and having good information when it comes to governance level. And look, just one last question, if I may, and it's following on from Councillor Rob and Sarah's questions about sharing and the overruns, etc. Given that lockdown has put us all in this situation, and it's something that neither party foresaw, if there's such a word, I just made it up. Do we have any ability to ask for central government contribution to any of these contractual overruns? Because that, or whether insurance covers that, I'm not sure. Can you answer that?
So the answer is generally no. So it's a contract between us as the principal and the contractor. But in this case, and it's exceptional circumstances, the government is contributing to New Zealand Inc. through wage subsidy schemes, etc., etc. So one of our big considerations as we deal with the contractual issues to make sure that there's no opportunity for double dipping, for suppliers to take the government contribution, but also then contractually require us to pay for it. So that is one of the careful considerations we need as we are working on a project by project negotiation with each of our contractors to first establish how much contribution government has made to them, and for want of a better word, net it off any costs that we might incur under the contract.
Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, Chris, look, my question, I think I've understood you to say that there will be no additional funds required in either the annual plan or the long-term plan as a result of this additional quantum of $3.6 million.
I think, Councillor, what I said at this point in time with the scope that we understand for the water treatment plant and our expected market price, there'll be no requirement for extra funds. But we've still got work to do to develop that water treatment plant and put it onto the market. And every time we go to the market, there's a risk that our cost estimates haven't judged the market correctly. So that risk still exists as it exists for most of our projects.
I guess further to Councillor Rob's question, I'm feeling very uncomfortable that I was totally there is a question to this. I was totally convinced for the reasoning and the justification for the extra quantum. The report explains why we didn't pick things up earlier and the fact that things have changed. But I'm concerned, and maybe this is a question to the Chief Executive, I'm concerned that we have a project here that will require $3.6 million in extra funds, but somehow it doesn't need, we don't need to find new funding. We now believe that, in fact, other subparts of this project are going to be able to be funded from funds that we'd already allocated. So we're going to move savings around to pay for it. I just wonder if that's a good financial approach. If we initially thought we were going to spend X, we now know we need to spend Y. Why you're not telling us we actually need to account for this new 3.6? And are you honestly trying to convince me that this doesn't mean that other little projects aren't going to be done, or subsequently other projects are going to come along later and you're going to come back for more money?
Yeah.
Chief Executive, is that how we should be doing our finances?
He's gone to just gone to a conference call. So Chris, can you answer that?
Yeah, can I just provide one bit of clarity to that line of thinking? So in the lead up to our 2 treatment plant upgrades, we from memory, we brought a report to council that said we had so many dollars for a treatment plant upgrade and so many dollars for a water treatment plant upgrade, that we would be best to combine them into one program of works, and that cost over the early part of the 10-year plan, recognising, sorry, just to divert a little bit, but we do have in the back end of the 10-year plan another treatment plant upgrade. So we have rolling programs of treatment plant upgrades, but for this 5-year period, we had $66 million. And the notion we put to council was, let's join the two together and prioritise the elements of work within that $66 million, and not just proceed on a wastewater treatment plant and a water treatment plant upgrade on their own. Now, there were many reasons for that. One was that it wasn't the funding where we had programmed for the water treatment plant. It was convenient for us to delay that by a year or two. So there were some programming issues. But the notion we put was that we would work within the $66 million envelope for the treatment plant upgrades based on a priority needs basis. So that's just a little bit of context to this particular one, and why when we went to council and that contract, we said that if there was any cost increases before these, we would balance it in the capital program.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Van Houten.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. That last explanation is really helpful for me. It speaks to a bit of the question that I'm proposing to ask. And if we look at the $3.6 odd million additional cost to this part of the project, it represents around about 10%, I guess, of the cost of that project, but that can be absorbed in the overall works in both of those jobs. I'm just wondering about the practice of inflating the job or through the forecast scoping of it, and that is it general practice to build in that kind of contingency so that when you're faced with this kind of an issue, there is the ability to be able to balance that out. And thinking then about that, does that impact on our confidence in pricing of future jobs that might be coming up? Is that clear?
Yeah, like it is clear, and it's a really important issue as well. And if I could just be simplistic to illustrate a point, like as staff, we can always give you a cost that will not be exceeded. So when I came to you for this one here, I could have said I need $100 million because I want to allow for every single risk. And then I would have delivered these two treatment plants well within budget. But I would have tied up $40 million of capital that would crowd out your ability to do everything else. So when we are looking at a portfolio of projects, we guess what the price will be on a 50% sort of percentile basis, and half the time the price might go over the budget, and half the time they might come under. If we went to a 95th percentile confidence level, there wouldn't be, you just tie up a lot of money in contingency. So we do work with this risk. We live with this risk that our individual projects will go over, and equally we have some projects come under. So the theory is that if you're working at expected level budgets, it evens out over a portfolio. So I think that's sort of an answer to your question.
Yeah, and I think it's an excellent strategy.
Thanks, Councillor. Committee members, are there any more questions? I think I've had everyone's hand. You're looking lovely today, Mayor Southgate, looking refreshed. All right. Look, I will move the staff recommendation on page 16. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Forsyth. Now, anybody like to debate on this item? No? Okay, we'll go straight to the vote. Just raise your hands, all those in favour. I'll call them out. Councillor Von Austin, Councillor O'Leary, I was going to say Councillor Wright, Councillor Petco, Bunting, Wilson, Gallagher, Mungai Norm and Deputy Mayor Taylor, Councillor Forsyth, Mayor Southgate and Councillor Thompson and Councillor McPherson. So that's everyone. No one is opposed. So that's carried. Thank you, committee members. All right, now we're going to move to item 8, which is the Suburban Response Team Trial. Now, we did have one item in the public forum. Now, committee members, that's been emailed to you at 5 minutes past 10. So if we just take a few minutes just to read that now. Got you, Dave. Okay. All right, so we've read that submission. They did indicate that they didn't want to speak. So first of all, I'm just going to go, before we go to questions, I'm just going to, unless Councillor McPherson, you had a question on process?
No.
Okay, all right. So I'm just going to go to the General Manager, Jen Beard, first to introduce, and then we have Paul and Calvin online also to when we move into questions. So over to you, Jen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. Look, I just thought I would cover off the survey. I realise that there are pages and pages of verbatim comments in there, so I just thought I would quickly draw your attention to the last page in Diligent. It's page 58, and that's where the aggregated results of the survey sit. So what you'll see from there is, a really positive response to the survey, and certainly on the ground as well. I mean, I'm regularly getting commentary and emails from people very complimentary about what the Suburban Response team are doing. If I was going to sum up the commentary that's on all of those pages, look, basically, in terms of what the problem is and what members of the business communities in the suburbs are saying, their concerns largely centre around people generally hanging around and at times asking for money and sometimes shoplifting. I think that business owners recognise and acknowledge that there are other issues at play here, things like substance abuse and addiction, mental health issues, poverty, those sorts of things. But also they're feeling that CitySafe is helping with those, dealing with these people and pointing them in the right direction. I think that these business owners also feel that this activity outside their stores puts customers off and is generally intimidating both to them and to their customers. In terms of the impact, I think that, when I read through these, I picked out sort of 4 key areas. One, that visibility has reduced the incidence of people asking for money. 2, that business owners report that they feel safer and they believe their customers feel safer because of the safety officers. 3, that the patrols have made a big difference to how safe the shop owners or store owners feel, but also in how they manage these situations themselves. Obviously, City Safe officers are not there all of the time, but one of the key things that they do is educate store owners and business owners on, how to deal with these challenges themselves. And the other thing, if you read through, is a consistent piece of feedback that business owners would like more site visits and more officers around more of the time, which, I guess we're not surprised about. So just wanted to give you a quick summary, and just happy to take questions. And as you said, Chair O'Leary, Paul Blumen, who is the leader of the City Safe operations team, is on the call as well.
Great, thanks, Jen. I've got a list already. Just indicating early this morning I received a motion from Councillor Bunting, who had a seconder who's not actually in attendance. So Councillor Bunting, you'll have to find a new seconder for that. And that's, he wants to move option 2 on page 24 of the report. And when we get to it, I'd be indicating an amendment, which would be the staff. Looks like Mayor Southgate's going to second that. And I'd be indicating an amendment, which would be the staff recommendation. So we'll head for questions now. I've got a bit of a list here. We'll start with Councillor McPherson.
Thanks very much, Angela. Can you hear all right?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. Fantastic. Look, Jen and or other staff, firstly, my first question is, how do you respond to the second sentence in paragraph 2 of the submission from Rebecca Graham, which says, however, no other key stakeholders seem to be represented in the report/survey. There seems to be little input, and then she lists a whole series of sectors, basically, in the social services sector. That, in other words, that the suggestion this is only a sort of a survey of business.
So I'm sure that Paul will want to jump into this one. But one thing that I would say is that the team work really closely with the People's Project. That in terms of and have worked through very closely with them on this suburban response team. But Paul, you might have something else to add.
But there's nothing in here from the People's Project.
No, not in terms of a response to the survey.
Mm. And the rest of the people in that sort of sector, social workers, community groups.
So this is where I'm going to need to ask Paul in terms of the conversations that he's having with those groups, and I can see he's still muted. I'm going to text him and see if he's available.
How's that? Thank you very much.
Great.
Chairperson, councillors and Mangawai, the issue that we started with this program, I guess, was that the pressure came from the retail or business sectors out in the community. So the initial survey that we took was obviously targeted at them, very tight time frame. When we had to do a comparison after 6 months, of course, we pretty much were then caught in the cycle of having to do the same survey with the same type of clients to get a result that could be measured. Having said that, in the background, of course, we have the Community Perceptions of Safety survey that is done by the Community Development Group. Some of the other social issues out in the community are taken care of by, again, the community advisors and the organisations they work with. The impact on the public, it's the safety officers are always responding to, obviously, the calls from the businesses, but they also get a consistent number of calls from members of the public who feel intimidated at going to their local strip mall, so the local dairy and hairdresser and the like that they need to go to. Difficult for us to survey those without looking like we were targeting just those who were ending up with a service that was working for them. We work very, very closely with the People's Project. And the People's Project, of course, is not just a single organisation. They have the mental health workers, WINS workers on site. So each person we come across, we're very aware of their background, we're very aware of their social needs, and we work very closely with People's Project around whether they've moved out of accommodation for different reasons, whether they need accommodation, and then, of course, the addiction issues that tend to drive most of the begging. Does that help?
Yes, thanks. And look, I had another question, the only other one. 2 to 3 years ago, when we were debating increasing our presence of the response people in the CBD, some people suggested that it was absolutely inevitable that would push the problems out into the suburbs. And that was downplayed a bit by staff at the time. So I'm asking whether that sort of issue was tracked on the way through and why it's coming to us now. Has it just become a problem now after, in the last few months, or did we see no signs of this being immediately pushed out into the suburbs as we increase the response in the CBD?
Thank you for that. The original paper that was put forward did identify that there was a risk that it would drive these behaviours and some of our people who are begging out into the suburbs. At the time, the funding was to put in place, and the staffing were put in place to take care of the central city. I don't know how else to answer that, Councillor, sorry.
Yeah, well, no, but what did we track immediately on making that move that you've described? Did we track an increase, or whether there was any change in behaviour out in the suburbs, or is this just something that's only recently come to light?
No, so we did have some. So we started off with 60 people in the central city who were constantly hassling people for money on the street, money, cigarettes, or pretty much anything. That is reduced down to around about 5 or 6 regular beggars, and out in the suburbs, I'd be reasonably confident to say that perhaps there's another 7 or 8 regular beggars. The balance is that yes, it's been reduced by 40 odd people who thought that it was okay to run around hassling people for money, but there was some push out into the suburbs, certainly.
Thank you.
Tracking of it, no, it wasn't really tracked because we didn't have that wasn't our requirement of us.
Good.
Thanks.
Right, thanks, Councillor. Councillor Bunting.
No, look, thank you. My question's been answered now. Thank you.
Great. Okay. Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, look, thank you. My question is one of cost. I just want clarification. The report talks about roughly $2.5 million over 10 years. That's in addition to the existing $1 million a year we spend, or 10 million over the next 10 years for the current activities in the central part of the city?
Yeah, Councillor Wilson, the figures that you see in this report are covering the cost of the suburban response team only.
Right, and so
cost.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear, the current cost of the city safety activities in the CBD that we currently have is about $1 million a year.
Is Paul going to nod his head to that?
Councillor, certainly the $1 million a year includes the activities that city safe officers cover at the transport centre, the library, and quite an extensive part of the CCTV operation.
Yeah. So yeah, great. So I understand that, and that's good. I'm just trying to get an idea of the total quantum that we would be allocating to city safety activity over the next 10 years, and that's approximately $12.5 million.
Yes.
Yes.
And one further question. I just want clarity. Have I understood this correctly? We believe that there are now currently about 6 hardened beggars in the CBD, and did I hear you say about 7 out in the other suburbs that are known repeat beggars?
Yes, so that would be what we would consider our core, very hardcore group. The issues around the impact that they have and their ability to move around the city is really high. People who are trying to run their businesses, these people really impact on them.
A subsequent question, if I could. Could somebody tell me the cost if we were to exclude from the $1 million that is the current cost for delivering City Safe in the city? Could you give me a cost of the provision of cost for providing the monitoring of the cameras and the transport centre versus the balance of that activity out of the $1 million?
Sorry, Councillor, I can't give you that right now. I don't have the figures broken down in front of me, but they're certainly available for if you'd like them in the future.
Councillor, wonder if I might be able to join. I'm not to answer your last question, but to add something to your previous question, which was around the number of the hardcore or the hardened group that Paul made reference to. I think just in terms of context, that is not the only group that we deal with, and that is certainly a hardened group that have a larger draw and demand on the time. But there are certainly a large number of people who are still come to our attention at various times. We just happen to have a hardened group that forms a strong centre part of that.
Thank you. Just one question to you, using all of your policing background and your current experience. Would spending $12 million over 10 years to focus on, let's round up the figures to say 40 odd, both hardened and casual beggars, a use of funds that you would recommend?
I would certainly be recommending it, but not. And it was a different set of maths that I would be using to what you just did then. It would be around what is the value add that comes from our communities feeling safe, to be able to visit their local shops and to feel safe in their community, and that's a central part of being able to be in your community, be active, lead an active life when you are not feeling that you are somehow compromised because of feelings that you are not safe.
Isn't that the role of the police that is funded from Wellington?
There is certainly a role for the police, but I would suggest that the police are not the only people to be, or only organisation to be involved in safety and having a safe environment. And if we want to give credit to our purpose of improving the well-being of Hamiltonians, it would seem to me that safety is one of those in terms of enhancing the well-being of Hamiltonians. You can do that in a safety sense.
Okay, great. Thank you, Councillor. Now, I've still got a long list here, so I haven't forgotten anyone. We're going to Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Angela. Just following on from Councillor Dave's questioning there around, I guess, the amount of information that we have in terms of, the effectiveness of this is kind of concerning. Like, how do we don't have information on how many people are actually being connected to social services, how many, people are, I guess, how we're seeing that, we're getting a cycle of people being moved around the city potentially, but there seems to be little information in terms of the perspective of the well-being of the people that we're seeing as this problem. And also, yeah, so I'm just wondering whether we could actually get further information before making some kind of decision around this.
Okay, so just can I jump in there and just look, these are all great questions, but just remind everyone that this is not around the delivery of the City Safe service. This is an extension to the suburbs, and it was a trial. I'm noting some of the concerns some of you are raising, and maybe it's that we just, particularly for new members, need to understand, and for some of us old ones, need to understand again why we put City Safe in, how it came about, the history and background behind it, but I don't want to get into that today. Appreciate some of you might think you need that to make this decision, but we have known that this trial has been going on, so I just want to make sure that we're focused on the a report which is just about whether or not we continue with the service to suburban areas at this point. Happy to set up something after this if members want a real chew over the whole City Safe service.
Yeah, I would be interested in actually looking at, what consideration is being given to alternatives. Say in the submission received this morning, there was talk about having somewhere for people to go during the day, and I understand that one of the issues with introducing City Safe into City Centre was that there was actually a lot more services available for those people in need there. And then when they were driven out to suburbs where less of those services were available. So, are we actually, I'm just questioning whether we're approaching this in the right way, and I would like to have further a much deeper conversation and actually get some more data. And
I can certainly
take that as an action point.
Yeah, and City Safe, the budget for City Safe to continue as a service is a long-term plan, because it is in the current long-term plan as well, so we can certainly set that up.
Just one other question more around the extension and the process of this. I'm quite concerned that we're looking at this outside of the context of the annual plan, where we've got a whole heap of competing priorities, and also outside of the context of a better understanding of our financial situation and our ability to take on more debt with, whether we can increase debt levels and things. So was there any consideration given to somehow making it possible to, bring this into the annual plan conversation rather than be making a decision on it now?
So what this
premature.
So what this resolution does is move this into that annual plan process. So this was one of the items earlier in the year that was flagged as being on a slightly different trajectory. You'll recall there were a handful of projects that didn't fit the exact annual plan timeframe because they were on, this one was going through its trial and it had to go through its own briefing and resolution through this committee. But now that it's here, if you decide to move ahead with it, the resolution says that it becomes a consideration into the annual plan. So you have that conversation at the annual plan.
Jen, that makes sense. And what impact though does that have in terms of the staffing? The City Safe officers on contracts, fixed term, like what does that look like? And then do we come into employment issues with having uncertainty around, whether it will be funded or not in the annual plan?
So they are on fixed term contracts to the end of the financial year, and we're in your hands in terms of whether those are extended, made permanent, or just run their course towards the end of the year. So you'll be making a decision on the annual plan before that. It might be a few days before that, but that's the hand we're dealt in terms of giving those people certainty or not.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Van Osten.
Sorry about that. All fingers and thumbs trying to unmute. Thanks for that. Thanks for your report and the 12 months that have gone into the trial, or almost. My question follows on a little bit more from Sarah and Dave, and asks that, look, apart from the other organisations named by Dr. Graham, what other community networks do we have in our suburbs that we know of existing around with a similar focus of neighbourhood safety? And one that comes to my mind, of course, is Neighbourhood Watch. What others are out there that we're aware of in this space?
There is certainly, in addition to Neighbourhood Watch or Neighbourhood Support, as it is, there are also community patrols, which is another one which we have a close relationship with, both on the ground in the suburbs, but also through their contact into our video centre as well.
And is there any particular group that a small business can participate in or get support from, or use as a way of educating themselves and, you know, really becoming a participating partner in the solutions-driven nature of this?
A number of the larger shopping centres have the likes their version of the Central Business Association. There is one in East Hamilton for the East Hamilton shopkeepers around there. There is another one that's related in Dinsdale that's either driven by the local retailers themselves or through the umbrella group that in terms of the property developer that owns or overviews a great deal of that area.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Maxine, I would just add to that that CitySafe are connected to those associations and help them have those conversations in terms of that education piece about how they can help be a part of that solution.
Yeah, I see that education is a really important part about that, and giving people confidence to be able to deal with issues is useful. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Forsyth, you're next.
No, that's fine.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, Deputy Mayor's just stepped out, so I've got Dave. I've got you on the list again, but I'll just move you down the bottom there. Councillor Hamilton. No, he's gone. Mayor Southgate. No question? Okay. Mangai Norm, your turn.
I do have a question.
You do have a question. Okay.
I was just wondering if we were putting up, sorry, it's technology. I was muting myself. Are we using the little raise your hand flag at the side, or am I just waving?
No, just waving, and I'll keep a list in order. I did send you a message, but you're probably not, I don't know if you're getting my chat messages.
Well, yeah, I'm concentrating on a couple of things. Sorry about that, but
that's okay. Yeah.
So, look, first of all, thanks to staff for this really good report. And this, you know, is what it is, a trial. We did it for a purpose. I guess what I want to know is, and I'm happy to support Mark's recommendation for the points of discussion as to where and when we should pull back on this work. So from the report and from staff, and Angela, you've got the longest experience in the CitySafe of all of us. I'm interested in hearing what would be the perverse or unexpected consequences if, and we're in a really unusual time with COVID, if we pulled back on this right now. We have the LTP 5 months away from discussion, even if that. What would be the perverse consequences of doing any other than extending it and allowing us to fully delve into the benefits and costs of it for a long-term plan?
Mayor Southgate, basically just the removal of the patrols from the central city. So in the 8 months, we recorded about 21,000 visits to businesses and lots of interactions with people. So basically that just wouldn't happen. So we wouldn't have the team. So we would go back to having just the City Safe patrols in the central city, and the patrols wouldn't happen in those areas, and therefore we wouldn't be able to have the conversations we're having in terms of connecting those people to the right services, but also supporting the businesses to
but if we extend the trial to the LTP, then we're all right because we've got coverage until we can talk about it. Yeah.
Yes.
So given that we're in unusual circumstances and crime will be exhibiting itself in a slightly different way.
Mayor Paula, if I could just make a comment in there, and that look, looking forward, I absolutely endorse what you were saying about that. I mean, my projection as we move forward in the COVID environment, as we move into the post-COVID environment, we are likely to have an increase in the number of people who are rough sleeping. We are likely to have an increase in the number of people who are visible and are undertaking begging activity. There will, in my view, likely be some increase in some social deprivation as it goes across the community, and that will be exhibited not only in the central city, but equally as much, or if not more, out in the suburban area, and that would be an area that we would not be otherwise able to service in terms of having a presence and a response to the community need out there.
So your suggestion is that at this time, more than ever, it would be expedient to hold on to the trial for a period of time to see what comes out of COVID and have a look at the whole picture then. Because this is, I'm just interested on your views too about, this isn't just about the people that are exhibiting antisocial behaviour or sleeping rough or any of that. This is also about the effect on the local communities, isn't it? So, for example, those suburban trials went to Dinsdale because the residents of Dinsdale were experiencing some uncomfortable behaviour and concerning behaviour in their neighbourhood. So it's a little bit of outcome for both, isn't it?
I think you've absolutely nailed it on the head there, Mayor Paula. There are those very aspects that you've talked about. There is the aspect of the impact on local community. There is the impact of the individual, and whilst I would have been a supporter of this with or without the COVID environment and what I foresee as the likely post-COVID environment, I think will be an even greater demand and need for the provision of a service of this nature.
And just last question in respect to the post-COVID, in which in one sense in a few days we might go to level 3, a new type of level 3, and we'll know later this afternoon what that might mean. But potentially or definitely it's going to mean more businesses are going to be able to open in a safe way. And so what you're suggesting, that as more business starts to open and more people start to come back into the streets for product, we're going to see more of the effects of people in the suburbs and social behaviour and the like.
That's certainly my view. I'm sitting in the Civil Defence Centre at the moment, and I'm seeing the demand we are getting in terms of from the public who are in vulnerable positions who need support, and I don't see an immediate end to that, and I think that will flow over into a greater presence in the public area.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, back to my order of list. Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your indulgence there, just for that moment. A question to Paul or Calvin. So I understand, obviously, if the trial stops, then there will be no more patrols in the suburbs, but there will still be the need, would there not, the ability, would there not, for City Safe staff to go to suburban centres as and when there's an issue arising, just as in the past. That's true, isn't it?
A couple of things in that. Firstly, we use the City Safe out in the suburban area. It's a 2-person patrol to ensure we meet the safety requirements. Our people who are patrolling in the central city are generally a 1-person patrol. There is always a risk if we're sending them to the suburban area. The other thing is, if we do that, we will then have no one patrolling the central city. Our numbers are such that we generally have 1 person or sometimes a crossover with 2 people working on at any given time.
Yeah, but the answer to the question is it not, that you would still have the ability to send people, CitySafe staff, to suburban centres as and when required, just as you did before this trial started, yes?
Not quite as straightforward as that, depending on the outcome of the risk assessment for the reason why they're going there.
Well, what's changed from before the trial started? Because I was with a CitySafe person when they went to Dinsdale Shopping Centre when there was a need. So you guys visited there and you did a good job there. What's changed? You can still do that, can't you?
I'm not sure what you're talking about particularly, but in essence,
no, sorry, Kelvin.
Your question is yes.
You're actually fudging the answers here. Before the trial started in the suburbs, if there was an issue in the suburbs, such as there was once in Dinsdale, you sent Paul or one of the other staff to that centre to do a job, and they did the job. So what I'm asking you is, surely that ability is still there if this trial ends?
We can still have an ability to send someone, but we need to do a risk assessment. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
If I could, perhaps I could help with the answer on this. Previously we would go find a staff member to go to a particular issue that might be happening in a particular area. The change with the suburban response team was that it was recognised that there needed to be a response. So when somebody rang, they could be assured that somebody would turn up. And so instead of dealing with perhaps a single major issue or perhaps something that the team could work on with a particular business, this was suburban response team was all about a almost instantaneous response time, and hence I think that currently we're able to provide 70% of our responses under 30 minutes, and remembering that that's moving right across town. So I think with respect, they are two different issues.
And the different, I guess the difference is prior to this, and I'm hearing what the Deputy Mayor is saying, prior to this, we still responded to the suburban areas if we felt we really had to, but it was a minimal level of service as opposed to having a dedicated response team, which is a full level of service.
Yes, thanks, Chair. Yeah, and that's the point I was making. It won't be the gold-plated service, but it'll still be service. The other question was, when seeking feedback on the CitySafe performance for this report, did you ask the police to make a submission or to give any comments towards it?
So the police have provided feedback. That was in the briefing that we had a few weeks ago. And
I remember the briefing. Okay. I just thought there might be some more today.
Oh no, that was their feedback.
Okay, thanks, Jen. All good.
Thank you, Deputy. Thanks, Deputy Mayor. All right, Councillor, I've got Councillor Hamilton and then Mangai Norm left on my list. Councillor Hamilton and Councillor Petco, and Councillor Wilson for a second time. So, Councillor Hamilton.
Thanks, Chair. Just a question of clarity, because obviously we have some screen challenges. The current amendment is the staff recommendation, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the motion is the 1 year continuation of Councillor Marks?
Yes, option 2, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mangai Norm.
Yep, kia ora, Jen and team. I was trying to find the cultural considerations again within this report, because I think there's a strategy within a strategy, and I'm going to assume that some of these people, the majority of them, have a whakapapa, they have a cultural connection to a iwi hapu or marae and marae. And so my question is what cultural considerations have been thought about or processed in regards to the role of iwi and their culture, their Māori culture, as a solution towards these issues? Notwithstanding that we have a JMA, a joint management agreement with the tribe, and something like this where majority of, and I say our people, our Māori people, are in the streets, and the role of culture and the Māori culture could be a solution. Has that been factored and considered? And has iwi been providing a contribution to the survey as well.
Paul, are you going to pick that up?
Sorry. Yes. So the work we've done with Waikato Tainui recently has been more around the responding to requests for support. We work very closely with the Māori wardens around the support, particularly in the transport centre, but the bigger question that you're asking is no, we haven't done that, other than work through People's Project as far as trying to ensure that their basic social and support requirements are met. Beyond that, no, that's not been our role.
Because I think that there's an opportunity there, and I know that Waikato Tainui provides support to Waikato Tainui people who have that whakapapa connection, and my assumption is that some of these people do have a culture connection some way, somehow, and yeah, it aligns up to the tribal whakatupuranga 2015 to the well-being of those people. So an opportunity there, I believe.
I think you're correct. Yeah.
Thanks, Norm. Councillor Petco.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just reflecting on the very visible police presence over the last few weeks in the suburbs, and I'm just wondering if there's an opportunity over the next 12 months, assuming that we focus on Councillor Bunting's motion, that we have much more interaction with the police so that they can assess with us the success of their current community interaction and whether or not they are going to continue that beyond the lockdown period to the benefit not only of us in terms of cost, but also the community.
Councillor Rob, I couldn't pretend to speak on behalf of the police, but it is my observation that during this period of lockdown that you've referred to, the police have to, in order to have the best, widest possible presence, they have in fact ceased doing a lot of other activity to ensure all their people are more visible. Now, I can't comment on how sustainable that would be, but in terms of the earlier part of your question there, or your commentary, we have incredibly close contact with the police through both City Safe at the grassroots level, out on the street, in the suburban areas, and also through our information and other sharing arrangements that we have with the police, and that includes weekly meetings and a whole range of other things. So we're very closely connected currently, but I couldn't comment on what the post-COVID environment might look like from a policing perspective.
Do you think it's our responsibility to be doing this work when the police are trained, and certainly in terms of what I've observed in the few times I've been allowed to leave home over the last 3 weeks, they're doing a pretty good job?
I'm not sure I can adequately answer that for you. Your question was, is this a role that we should be engaged in? My own view on that is it is absolutely a view that a role that I think we should be engaged in, but that's not taking the role of the police, that's working in support of and alongside the police.
Okay. We've got a new security firm who are undertaking general council security. Have we approached them to assess their ability to undertake this work going forward?
When we first started City Safe as an operation, it was originally a security guards provided by the council security contracted provider. Over the period of time, we found that the skill sets that were required were not as, and they just weren't being available to us through the security firm that was made available, and that led to us moving away from the security firm into direct engagement and employment of the security of the City Safe staff.
Yeah, but my question, Kelvin, is have we asked the new firm whether or not they have got the skill set to do this work?
No, we haven't.
Okay. I'm just a little bit concerned about paragraph 35 and the total cost of the initiative. You've got in there the 237,000, which I'm not sure, is that salary only?
Salaries only.
Correct.
So we've got cars that we've bought specifically for?
No, we've repurposed an existing vehicle that was within the City Safe fleet.
Okay, so we've got gaps in that on that schedule for the likes of depreciation and we've got uniforms. You've got there are other costs that I suspect need to go in there so that we've got better visibility over. Do you have an idea as to what those costs are that are not included over and above the salary costs?
I'll see if I can defer to Paul on that, who might have a better detailed handle on that.
So the costs there would include a radio, which we have currently borrowed from another part of the council. So there's a radio each for the two staff that are out, and uniforms for 5, and body camera for 2 staff. I suppose we all up there's probably $5,000-6,000 to kit up that function. But having said that, of course, that's the radio will last a good 5-6 years. The same with the body camera, and it's really uniform is probably the churn. So it's certainly not in the overall budget something that it would seem a little insulting to come to council and ask for funding on a set of clothes to add to the cost.
Yeah, but it's part of the total cost, isn't it?
Absolutely.
As indeed the operation of the motor car, even though the motor cars come from somewhere else in the organisation, it still has to be fueled and maintained. So I'm just a little bit concerned that those costs are not there, even if they are, as you say, relatively small. And the other major cost that we see in other areas of council is the overhead cost, and that's also missing. So I'd like to get some visibility over that also. And I know the argument will always be that cost is incurred anyway by the organisation, but it tends to go up the more activities that we get involved in. So what's the possibility of getting some handle around what those costs actually are, so that if this, and certainly even if it's only relatively small, the motion that we've got needs to be changed, because that cost of 237 is clearly only one part of the total cost of the operation.
So, Councillor, depending on what motion gets accepted, and either one of them includes annual plan, all of that detail that you're asking for will come through with that report, because this is simply to have this considered with all the other projects in the annual plan.
Okay, all right. That's all my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Great, thank you. Okay, Councillor Wilson, final 2 questions, please. Or you may only have one.
I also, Madam Chair, just want to foreshadow a foreshadowed amendment.
Okay, yes.
And happy to explain that at any time. My question, Kelvin, have you been privy to the Prime Minister's announcement at 1 o'clock as to exactly what we can do at level 3 and level 2?
No, I have not. There is a councillor briefing that's actually underway as we speak. Sorry, councillor. There is a civil defence controller briefing that's underway as I'm sitting here. That may be included in that, but I haven't been made privy to it as yet.
And I'm correct in saying that, because I asked right at the beginning of this, currently City Safe isn't functioning because it was deemed, I think you said, not an essential service. And are you now telling me that you believe since you haven't had insight as yet, that it will be an essential service under level 3?
My belief would be that under level 3, as I understand what level 3 might be, and like everyone else, I'm guessing that there would be back in that CitySafe could be back operating. Yes, that's my belief, but without having seen level 3 requirements.
Thank you. That's what I was
Thanks,
asking.
Councillor. So do you just want to indicate to us what your foreshadowed amendment may be?
Yeah, and I don't know if I'll get a seconder. I'm hoping I might. In fact, we do not extend the trial and we do not add it to the long-term plan.
So it would just be A, receives the report.
Correct.
Okay. All right. When we, if we need to come to that, I'll ask for a seconder. Although, Councillor Thompson, were you indicating already that you would second that? Okay. All right. Okay, that's all the questions. Thank you, committee members. We've drilled down into a lot there. Now, we're going to go to the motion, which is Councillor Bunting and Mayor Southgate motion, which is option 2 on page 24. And so that's the motion, and that is for online viewers. That is to continue another 12 months of trial for this service and consider it along with the annual plan. That is the motion. My amendment, seconded by Councillor Forsyth, which we deal with first, is in the staff report, and that is to receive the report and that we continue with the suburban response team, that it becomes, thank you, Amy. There we go. Amy's putting it on the screen for us. And thanks to Amy for joining us. Rebecca had to step away. So you can see on there that my amendment with Councillor Forsyth is that it becomes a fully funded operational activity, but still again being considered with the annual plan. And you can also see, committee members, that there's a foreshadowed amendment there as well. So I've already got, I'm going to assume that everyone's going to want to speak on this, but I'm going to start with the, and we're going to we'll deal with both of them, so we'll only speak once. Obviously, we're going to be voting on the amendment first, but I'm going to go to the mover of the motion, which is Councillor Bunting, and then to Councillor Southgate first. Then I've got Councillor McPherson. And then actually, I might just go around the room because I think everyone will want to talk. So over to you, Councillor Bunting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, look, I'm trying to do the right thing here. This would have been a very different debate for me a month before COVID. And I think the approach this motion takes is the most balanced of all of them. It is a very different world than it was a month ago. And to my mind, if there was ever going to be a need, or if there's ever going to be community tension, it's going to be over the next year. We're entering a very, very, very hard time. I'm suggesting that we push this forward by another year and then have a good hard look at it during the long-term plan. And when we do have that discussion, I want to see a heck of a lot better survey than the one we've got. I couldn't understand that survey for a start. From what I can gather, we've only seemed to have surveyed the people who are likely to want a free security service. I wanted in the briefing to see if this worked, and I asked that question. It hasn't been asked here, so I'm very disappointed. And reinforced by Dr. Rebecca Graham's submission, that information just isn't there if it's working or not. However, having said that, this is going to be a time of extreme tension. So I think this supporting it for one more year and then looking at the LTP will get us through a very, very tough time. I don't want to spend unnecessarily, and normally wouldn't support the carrying on of this. But like I said, I think there's going to be more community tension than ever. So I think this is this motion here casts the balance between prudence and pragmatism, really.
Great. Thank you, Councillor Bunting. I'm going to go to the seconder of the motion, Mayor Southgate, next. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, sorry. I had to get my mouse across 3 screens. It's complicated. Thank you very much for that. Thank you for the good debate. I'm supporting the motion because I do believe in the City Safe project. I think it has delivered good results. I thank and support the team for what they're doing. I think we're in uncertain times. We don't actually know what we're going to need coming out the end of this entirely. So I don't want to stop this project hard up. I want to have a chance to look at it. But as with the level of questions, some of which people like, or councillors like Sarah and others have asked, there are some things to explore and discover within this project yet to come. How do we make it the most fit for purpose? What do we really need to make it enduring, lasting, visible, appropriate, and all of those kind of things? And so me, it is about meeting the needs of the people that are in the streets, who are in the streets for a variety of reasons. Some have criminal intent, others do not. And also the local community themselves being able to, of course, go into their suburban areas. And this is where this came out of, is that people were feeling under threat from begging and people loitering by the doors of shops, and even the shop owners, as you know, Angela, because you heard from many of them in Dinsdale, were really, really concerned about that, and they felt fearful and uncomfortable, and their customers were put off. But we don't want any of that to happen, and that's why I want to extend it, but I want it to have a robust conversation in the long-term plan, which is, because we've got some new councillors on board too, which is where we can have a good fresh look at some of those things. So that's why I'm supporting it.
Thank you, Ms Southgate. Councillor McPherson, you're up next.
Thanks very much. Look, I'm supporting the motion as well. I think it's way too early and in the wrong place and time to be trying to propose something for the LTP. I realise it's not a final decision, but I think that it's not taken, that part of the amendment is not in, it doesn't have the right context discussion around it. I'm extremely aware, as I think Councillor Ewan will be, that the whole thing about City Safe came about because it was a political compromise in order to get someone's vote way back in about 2002 or 3, and for no other reason. Yes, there is a need, but I don't think we've really developed our thinking properly in this area, other than the connection with organisations like People First, which I think has been a plus out of this whole exercise, but I don't think that was has sort of really been baked into the City Safe system. I think that I would have expected, like several other commentators have said, there to have been some facts and figures far more extensive on the how effective the trial has been in a whole lot of ways, other than just a survey of the people who are going to say they want more of it. Of course, I would have liked to have seen how this would be part of an overall plan for city safety, how it connects with our push that seems to be going in fits and starts to get community policing back into the suburbs. Because I do agree with Councillor Wilson, that is their job, and we've only started doing this because they weren't doing that job fully, if at all. It does seem to me to be incremental creep, or someone else said getting bigger than Ben-Hur. I'm worried about that. Like Councillor Bunting, I would have said a month ago not to continue it. I think in the current circumstances, we should, for safety's sake, for the community safety's sake, for another year, but I want a whole lot better set of statistics and information put to us in a year's time before I'd support an extension, not just of the suburban one, but the whole City Safe program. So it's marginal that I'm even supporting the motion here. I have some sympathy with the foreshadowed amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. And just another reminder, look, don't need to raise your hands. I know everyone wants to talk on this, so I'm going around the room. Councillor Van Osten, you're next on my list.
Thanks very much. I'm very much in doubt of the motion, and I really fear that what happens in a lot of these situations is that we start a project in the middle of the city, we pushed out these people to the edges, and now we're dealing with the consequences of that. And I can acknowledge that there is an education part of the program, and that's what I applaud, and that's what I want us to be able to more reasonably focus on. I think you can't ever underestimate the power of the people to be able to find solutions for their own problems, and that given some education and the ability to be able to come together to understand and explore ways that they can do that usually makes the most sense to me. It's much more positive and empowering way than stoking fears in people as well. I believe that there really is the need to, as Mayor Southgate has talked about, exploring and discovering other solutions that we might be able to participate in. However, I see that this will be a chance in the annual plan for us to be able to explore it in comparison with all of the other projects that are being proposed and expenses, and by then hopefully we'll have a better understanding about what our financial position will be, and have a real idea about where we might be able to then put the money. So we will be debating this again, and that gives me a little bit more of a confidence about how we might be able to look at it in the whole. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'm also keeping time, so just in case somebody decides to go off into the ether. All right, next on my list is Councillor Petco.
I presume that comment was for my benefit, was it?
No, not at all.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I do not believe this work is the responsibility of council. Community safety is a central government responsibility and not a ratepayer cost. I think the police presence in the suburbs in recent weeks, for a different reason, has been evident and very visible, and pressure should continue on central government to provide businesses and residents with this service going forward in place of the current service offered by council. I do have concerns with the survey questions being so limited, and I would have thought at least there would have been a question suggesting whether the police should be providing this service to the businesses rather than it being omitted completely. And I also think there's a need for all the council costs to be reported, and I'm just a little bit concerned that we've only really got part of the cost of providing this service. I'm prepared at this stage to support the motion, which will give us 12 months to work with the police and central government to arrive at an outcome that I think is the appropriate outcome in this area. Like Dave, I probably would be supporting the foreshadowed amendment, but at this point, I think the motion will give us that 12 months, a degree of certainty and continuity, so that we can try and get into place something that even the police may feel and central government may feel is part of the new norm post COVID-19. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. Well done. You still had a minute to go. Councillor Wilson, you're up next.
Thanks, Councillor Angela. Look, I don't believe this is our top priority under these current economic terms that we're facing. The reality is we knew when we got the best job in the world as city councillors, we were going to need to make important decisions and sometimes decide how to reprioritise exactly how we should allocate our funding and when. And while the academics and the IMF debate the finer academic arguments and the nuances of whether that cloud that is on the horizon is a recession or a depression, for the average person sitting in their home, including me, I think it's fair to say the economy and how we spend our money, things are not looking too good, and we're going to have to make some really important prioritizations in what we spend and how we spend our money. The reality is, unlike the Mayor said, Angela, you may have had more time on the City Safe issue than most. Dave Mack and I were there from day one in its inception and how it was brought about. And somehow it's grown from 250,000 a year to what will be a significant $12.5 million spend over the next 10 years if it goes ahead. And I'm simply saying, in this current economic conditions, that this is not how we should be allocating our money. We are philosophically debating whether or not we can afford to pay our worthy staff a livable wage. We are debating how we're going to prioritise, potentially up to needing to spend $300 million to participate with projects that will come out of Wellington in the very near future as part of an economic stimulus. And these areas that are going to lead to long-term sustainable jobs and critically needed infrastructure is where we need to be allocating our resources, not in championing a city police force that should have been and must be the domain of the police. Now, I would live with keeping the current city safe in the CBD as it is now. I do not support expanding it into the regions. And I encourage you to go back and start realizing we're going to have to make some critical decisions about how we spend our money. And the ratepayers are going to want us to show that leadership. And I'm encouraging you that by spending this money, you're making a tactical error.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Right, next on the list is Councillor Gallagher.
Thank you. I'll be going for the motion at this stage. I do think, however, and I want to pick up Councillor Petco's points, and it's a bit with respect reminiscent of the whole thing when we had the eyesight debate, but we've got to remind ourselves that we've put another X amount towards tourism Waikato. So I think any report should give us the total picture in terms of the overheads and allocation. I certainly will look forward at the annual plan session to rediscuss this based on a more comprehensive report in terms of some of those figures as per what Councillor Petco and others have alluded to. I note the philosophical debate about what central government should provide through policing. And obviously, as part of this annual plan discussion, we'd want to have the police at the bottom at the table, sharing with us exactly their modus operandi in terms of their work in the suburban areas and what their thinking is in terms of that term community policing. I do, however, want to take this opportunity to thank our frontline staff who have been doing the city safe work around the city with dedication and conscientiousness, and I don't think we should ever lose sight of that in this particular debate. This is a debate about where we put our resources and what is the effective means, but I do thank them for their work. I'll be supporting, I think, the motion, obviously, to extend the trial, but very clearly we're going to have another comprehensive discussion during our annual plan session, as per alluded to by Councillor Van Oosten. And also I will be looking for far more comprehensiveness in terms of the survey, police input, noting the points of Dr. Rebecca Graham as well, and also a very deep dive into the total overheads in this area, and also the other regulatory type functions we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Goodness me, Martin, look at that. 1:45 to go. Well done.
You want them? Well, I feel I've failed.
No. Mangai Norm, you're up next.
I might be record time, but I'll be supporting the motion. I work in the philanthropic space, and the last 3 weeks have been a daily conversation around the needs of the community and the vulnerable, those people that sit in the streets that are the most vulnerable at this point in time. And we don't know what next week, next month, next year looks like in regards to the increase of this particular matter. And so allowing for the service to continue for a year to allow us to provide inclusive solutions, including police and others. I think there's a role of iwi there with their people, with our people as well. And so I'll just close off with this cultural saying from, it's actually Samoan one, e whaufau le alamea, and it translates into the jellyfish can cure the jellyfish sting, which means there's solutions by way of the people and partnership to help those in need.
Kia ora. Thank you, Norm.
Kia ora.
Deputy Mayor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I have a heavy heart on this one because I've been a supporter of CitySafe's extension into the suburbs. There was a need for it, there is a need for it. And I do believe, both from anecdotal feedback and from the stats on the number of interventions, that they have made a tangible difference. But I've been pretty strong in recent weeks on the need for us to cut our cloth in regard to COVID-19 and reflect that in our rates rises. It's all got pretty real for us in the last week, where we've realised just how much revenue we're going to lose, just how much we're going to have to borrow, just how much money we're going to have to put up for stimulus projects, and just how many projects we hope to advance in our annual plan to try and stimulate the economy. So the world has changed, folks, and our thinking needs to change as well. We are going to have to rethink a number of our decisions, including decisions we made during the first cut of our annual plan. We need to make sacrifices. So due to the operating cost of this, I can't support it, and I will be supporting the foreshadowed motion put up by Councillor Wilson. I am totally mindful that, as others have said, there will be financial stress and there will be more social problems. I have no doubt of that also. But I also remind you that CitySafe, before this trial started, played a role in the suburbs. I saw them do it. They went out to suburbs when there was need, and they did a good job. That can continue. So we're not having the gold plated. We're still having a service. And I would also say, I think we need to get alongside the police and have a serious talk. I think we need to involve them in this process and say, look, this is a change we're having to make. How can you step up in this area and do a little bit more in the suburbs in terms of businesses in particular to fill this void? So I would like to see us involve the police in this. And yeah, it's a heavy heart where I make these statements, but do not underestimate the difficult financial times ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Forsyth, you're up next.
Thank you. Just a couple of points. I'll be supporting the amendment. I just want us to reflect and think about the context and history of this proposal in the first place. And my recollection is this was a really community-led and a community request for our suburbs to have the support of CitySafe. And that came from not only the small business owners, but also from those people in the community that used and frequented and connected in their local areas, in their suburbs, with those businesses themselves. So I don't think it's been elected member-led. It's definitely come from our communities, and it's been a response. And what a good response it's been. I think it's something that's already proven that it works. I think it's something that's already changed the perception of people moving, working, relating, shopping in those suburban areas. They're now places that look better, rubbish-wise. I mean, at some point in time they looked scrappy, now they're looking better, and they're more lively. People are feeling much happier about going back into their suburban establishments and shopping there. And CitySafe, I think, play a key role not only in creating that sense of safety and confidence for not only the shop owners but people using those shops, but they're also connecting and communicating with the homeless, with the vagrants, whoever we've identified, or we put a name to them, but they're communicating with them potentially on a daily basis and providing a real social connection for those that don't necessarily have that face-to-face contact. And I think that's a really important thing. So our CitySafe, they're not just there telling people to move on and being the big bad guy. They're actually providing some social glue and social connection as well. And I think that's something that we need to recognise and acknowledge as well. It's not just a move on. Thank you. Heck, already. I think there's more to running a city as well than building bridges, building roads, picking up rubbish. It's about supporting our people in a great time of need. And look, without really understanding the detail of what lockdown 3 or 2 is going to look like, we already know that safe and safety is one of the big emphases. And look, our CitySafe people say it all. How are we going to monitor social distancing? It sounds like it's going to be a huge strategy for us going forward. And I think having CitySafe on the ground is really going to help us in that respect as well, to help. Police are not going to be able to be omnipresent and make sure that we're practicing social distancing. I think our CitySafe people will really be able to support that. So to sum up, this has come from our people, from our businesses, and from our people that frequent and use those businesses in the suburbs. CitySafe have already proven their worth. I think now more than ever, it's an opportunity for us to include them even more in our daily lives, and that running a city and responding to our people's needs is not just about giving them jobs and building bridges, picking up their rubbish. This is about social connection. This is about emotional safety and social safety, as well as literally social distancing safety. Thanks. I went over time, but cheers.
Thank you, Councillor Forsyth. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair Angela. So I am concerned, or possibly quite deeply troubled, by the information that we were given and the fact that we were given a very one-sided view of this situation. I think there's a lack of information on how effective it truly is. Are we recycling? Are we just moving people around and simply displacing them and shifting them somewhere else? And in terms of actually getting down to some of the core reasons for these people maybe engaging in the behaviour that they are, I don't think that this, at the moment we're really looking at how we're dealing with problems that underlie this, like addictions and mental health and poverty and things. And I'm just concerned that there's a much better way that we could be, potentially a much better way that we could be addressing this issue, because I understand the need for people to feel safe when they go out shopping and things, I understand the frustrations of businesses, but I'm not convinced that we've really thought about this enough. We've got enough information, enough data to know that we're doing the right thing here. We're lacking a voice from the people that we perceive as being the problem. We're lacking a voice from the social services who work closely with these people. And in some cases, maybe if we put the money towards something different, like providing a place for these people to go during the day, like Rebecca Graham said in her submission, somewhere to hit free and warm and inviting to have a cup of tea or coffee or go on the internet or something, maybe that's actually a better solution. So I would really like to see us take a deeper look at how we're approaching the issue of safety in the city, and try and understand in a deeper way whether there's a better way to approach it. So I think, in a way, we really need to be having this conversation as early as possible, because it could be quite a complex one. So I wouldn't want us to be waiting until we get to the long-term plan again, and then being rushed and still not having the information that we need or the options out on the table that we need to make, a much more informed decision. That's all from me. So I'll be supporting the foreshadowed amendment, but probably for a slightly different reason.
Thank you, Councillor. Right, Councillor Hamilton's next.
Thanks. Apologies, I've got to duck out in 7 minutes to do a submission on the IFF. Hopefully I can make the vote. Look, for Sarah and you that are supporting the foreshadowed amendment, let me just tell you my position last year. It was James Casson that raised this motion or resolution to push suburbs into the city safe into the suburbs. And I was against it because I said, no, this is like what Rob was saying, this is the role for the central government, this is the role for the police. And I have been humbled over the last 12 months and just seen how vital these people are at proactively moving people on, working with retail, just doing an incredible hybrid role between us and the police. And my goodness, they are doing a tremendous job. So I was the one out of 15 people, 14, 13 elected members last year that did not support the 200K. And this time I will absolutely support it and think it's a cheap investment. We heard Andrew Mortimer recently at one of our briefings while we were still doing face-to-face say the police just doesn't have the resources to fill this gap, and it doesn't have the nuance, the speed, the agility that CitySafe does. And I've heard this firsthand from clusters of retail markets. And if we're going to do all this economic development, stimulus, and encourage people to buy local and go out and support your local economies, but they don't feel safe, it will be in vain. I would like to at least support a 3-year trial, but that's not going to probably arrive on the table today. I totally support Margaret's comments. I encourage you, councillors, to at least give this 12 months. Let's get the reporting and the detail back, especially as we enter this crisis of uncertainty and social unrest. It's the very least we could do, and it's a cheap investment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hamilton. It was my proposal. Casson may have seconded it. Right. Councillor Naidu-Rolfe, and then I get a chance to have a talk and then a right to reply from Bunty.
Thank you, Chair Angela. I've seen CitySafe in suburbs in action, and the team, I believe that they do serve a purpose. Most of you know I own a suburban business, and my team have called CitySafe numerous times. Policing resources have not met this community need in the past, I believe. Maybe it will in the future, I don't know. We've had customers, we've had the general public feel unsafe with antisocial behavior, and I definitely see CitySafe playing a vital role between businesses and the community. Over the next 12 months, I see increased antisocial behavior, and I think public safety is still a priority, especially in the short term. So I will be supporting the motion. And the CitySafe team, most of us have visited them before, and I've asked them tons of questions in the past, and they are very familiar with the most vulnerable people who live in Hamilton. They've got close relationships with many of them, as well as with the agencies who can help them. Is it a perfect system? Probably not, but I think it's the best that we can do in the short term. I look forward to having a more in-depth wider look at the whole program come LTP. But for now, I think that it is quite important that we support this initiative, especially over the next 12 months.
Great. Thank you, Councillor. Look, thanks everyone for your contributions to the debate. I don't know. I wasn't on council when this was a version of this, because it's not the current service that we deliver now, was used by an elected member or given to an elected member to get a vote. And I would suggest you put those elected members that were there and may have some ill feelings towards that, put that aside. I would ask that, because it is a different service now. It's been going since probably 2014 in its current capacity. So I haven't just sat around the voting table over this time. I have actually worked on this, rolled up my sleeves and delivered a plan. I have to disagree very strongly with Councillor Thompson's comments about lacking a voice in this area. This is, first of all, this is an extension to a service that has been going since 2014. It came out of a city safety plan that responded directly to the community when we were having issues through psychoactive substances. And believe you me, City Safe's role in that was absolutely crucial and critical. We have had a safety plan, we've had a safety strategy. This has been a very long service that we've had for a very long time, and you all know how hugely supportive I am of it. The People's Project came about from that plan with City Safe involved, so very, very long history. But I hear what elected members are saying, particularly the new ones, and I have taken it on board that depending on what happens today, I will ensure that we have a really good roll your sleeves up workshop, look at all of City Safe, even just to bring people up to speed. Look, it's really clear to me, and I want to thank particularly Councillors Hamilton and Naidu-Rolfe. It's very clear to me that those of us who have actually had really direct experiences with City Safe truly understand the value that they give. And I have asked Councillor Wilson if he would don a high-vis vest and go out on patrol with them, because I've done that. And you don't really understand the service that they deliver for the communities, I think, until you have that direct experience. So thank you very much to those two councillors who have made those comments. I will be supporting the amendment, obviously. I prioritise. There's been a lot of conversation about, I'm timing myself, so don't worry, about budgeting, and that this is a critical time for us in terms of how we spend our money, and I absolutely agree. But there is nothing more important to me than keeping our communities safe. And Councillor Naidu-Rolfe was absolutely spot on. More than ever are we going to see antisocial behaviour increase when we get out of this lockdown. We are going to see that, and businesses are suffering now. I don't want to add extra pressure by pulling away a really valuable service. So I'll be supporting the amendment, and if that fails, I will be supporting the motion and encourage us to all at least continue with a trial at the very minimum. And rest assured, I've absolutely heard what everybody has said, and will make sure that we put together a really robust working session to bring everybody up to speed, so we can look at, the service again and its value, and all of the questions that everyone's raised. So with that, Councillor Bunting, I'll come back to you for any right of reply.
There we go. It's done before Ryan.
Yeah, same.
I'm going to need his vote. But look, there's a couple of points I do need to respond to in this. But I will reiterate that giving it 12 months more will give staff and the team a much better opportunity to give us some much better data to really see if this thing is working or not. It's a chance I don't want to take to get rid of it in the suburbs at the moment. Just look, in response to some of the speakers, Councillor Rob made the point that police presence has been effective, and I assume from that there was hinting that it is enough and can be effective, but I need to remind them that people are locked in their houses at the moment. Of course it's going to be effective. I could send my son on patrol at the moment and it would probably be effective. But I am glad of your support, Rob, for this, and endorse your comments about really working hard on the police for more community policing. But I think we can do that from a stronger position if we're at least doing our bit. Councillor Ewan says that this is not our top priority. I don't share that view. The well-being of Hamiltonians is my top priority. And to me, this is a very strong one. Economic well-being is one of our 4 well-beings that we adhere to. And the irony of that argument is that the only people we surveyed on this seem to have been businesses, and they love it. They think it's a great spending of money. So they would argue that our economic well-being is well served, and Ryan effectively argued that. The Deputy Mayor talked about cutting our cloth, and I agree. I absolutely agree. But can I please remind him that just last item, we just pushed through $3.6 million of a contract extension, and with not a hint or a skerrick of any part of that cloth being cut. So let's just be really careful about which parts of our cloth we cut. But I do agree, every dollar is vital, which is why I'm
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes, what's your point of order?
That Councillor Bunting has misled this virtual chamber by implying that we didn't question the cloth was cut on the last item. There was no additional funding to be cut. It was, in fact, the same level of spend. So the narrative he gave was false.
I'm not sure I agree with that. I see where you're going, Councillor Wilson, but I'm not sure I agree with that entirely.
Let me phrase that.
But if you, yes, that'd be great. Thank you.
We, the last one, we unanimously put through a $3.6 million alteration without so much of a mention of cutting our cloth. So I certainly don't mean any disrespect to you there, Jeff, but I just think we've got to, this is, I guess the point I'm trying to make in this is that this is a $250,000 spend for a year at a time where I'm putting some smart money on the fact we're going to need it. We're going to need it. It will give us a better opportunity to have a look at the better service. And I'm telling the team now that if the same data comes through from the same people, you probably won't get my support next time. But I say let's give it another year.
Right, thank you, Councillor Bunting. Now, how we're going to manage this process is we do have a foreshadowed amendment on the table, which is Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Thompson. But as normal process dictates, we'll deal with the amendment first. If the amendment fails, then Councillor Wilson's proposal comes up onto the table. If that fails, Councillor Hamilton actually indicated he had a foreshadowed amendment, but he is gone. So we would then go to the motion. So committee members, the amendment is the staff recommendation, and that is that the service becomes a fully funded activity and be considered in the annual plan. So we'll do that on the raise of hands. All those in favour of the amendment, please raise your hands. I think it's going to be a small number. So that's myself, Councillor O'Leary and Councillor Forsyth. All those against the amendment, please raise your hands. Councillor Van Oosten, Councillor Petco, Councillor Bunting, Councillor Wilson, Councillor Gallagher, Mangai Norm, Deputy Mayor Taylor, Mayor Southgate, Councillor Thompson, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Naidu-Rolfe, and that's it. Thank you. So that's clearly failed. Right, so the foreshadowed amendment, which again is on page 22, but it's only that receives the report. Now, the consequences of that means that the service stops, and that's been seconded by Councillor Thompson. So all those in...
sorry, just a technical question, if I may.
Yes.
A procedural question. So the city safe as we know it doesn't stop, but the city safe
just the extension.
Suburbs,
that's right, stop.
Right, and the exact date it stops again, is that at the end of June?
It would be the end of the financial year, yeah.
Right. So,
Yeah.
a
So
few
end
more
of
months.
June. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so everyone's clear on that. So we're now dealing with that as the amendment. So all those in favour, please raise your hands. So it's Councillor Von Oosten, Councillor Wilson, Deputy Mayor Taylor and Councillor Thompson. All those against the amendment, please raise your hands. Councillor O'Leary, Pascoe, Bunting, Gallagher, Mangai Norm, Forsyth, Mayor Southgate, Councillor McPherson, Naidu Rolfe. So that amendment has failed. Now we're moving to the motion, which is Councillor Bunting and Mayor Southgate, and that is option 2. And that is on page 24. And that is to continue the trial for 12 months and that it be considered in the annual plan. So all those in favour of that motion, please raise your hands. Councillor Van Oosten, O'Leary, Pascoe, Bunting, Gallagher, Mangai Norm, Forsyth, Mayor Southgate, Councillor McPherson, Councillor Naidu Rolfe. All those against the motion, please raise your hands. Councillor Wilson, Deputy Mayor Taylor, and Councillor Thompson. So the motion has been passed to continue with the 12-month trial and be considered at the annual plan. That becomes the substantive motion. All those in favour of the substantive motion, please raise your hands. Councillor Van Oosten, O'Leary, Pascoe, Bunting, Gallagher, Mangai Norm, Councillor Forsyth, Mayor Southgate, Councillor McPherson, and Councillor Naidu Rolfe. All those against, please raise your hands. Councillor Wilson, Deputy Mayor Taylor and Councillor Thompson. So the motion has passed. Goodness me, everyone. Very much. Now, I know I said we are going to stop at 1 o'clock. Let's just do the first, say, 15 minutes or make it 20 minutes for lunch for the PM's announcement. That should be all the guts of that. But let's just take a 6-minute toilet break now. So come back at 12:30. Thank you. We're moving on to item 9 now, which is the Hamilton Stormwater Bylaw Review. This is simply a process matter, but I will go to Eva Lisa just to, we'll take the report as read, but
so this is a process matter in terms of timing. So we're seeking the recommendation from the Infrastructure Operations Committee to Council to determine whether the bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the emerging issues of stormwater in Hamilton. So I have Mari Porter here as well, who is able to ask the technical questions in terms of the report being read and to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. And just a reminder again, elected members, this is just a process matter determining whether the bylaw is the right way to deal with it. Councillor Forsyth, question?
Thank you. It's probably a silly question. So if this isn't the most appropriate way, what other options do we have?
So we do have a number of other tools like regional infrastructure technical specifications, district plans, resource consenting. There's a number of other tools, and as part of the process we will still need to establish whether those tools and mechanisms are sufficient to deal with the issues that we need to manage.
So we would be doing this in conjunction with those other what are they called, instruments or ways?
Yeah. So that part of the assessment is to determine whether we need the bylaw in terms of whether the other tools and mechanisms that are already in place are sufficient, and so that's part of the process that we will work through. But there are other tools that, together with the bylaw, currently manage many of the stormwater issues that we have to manage.
And this is part of just our bylaw updating process, isn't it? It happens on a number of fronts with a number of services we have.
Yes, that's right. And with this particular bylaw, it was established in 2015, and under the Local Government Act, we need to review it after 5 years, and that's why we're bringing it to you now.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Mari.
Great, thank you. Doesn't look like there are any other questions. So I'm going to move staff recommendation on page, where is it? Oh, yes, 59. Seconded by Deputy Mayor Taylor. Any debate? All those in favour, raise your hands. I'm assuming that this one's going to be unanimous, so I'm not going to call out the names. Anybody opposed? No, no one's opposed. That's been carried. Wonderful, thank you. Right, now we're on to item 10. And this is our submission to the Accessible Streets package. Now, just want to say a couple of things leading into this one. I did set up a workshop last week, and we had a really in-depth discussion because there's a lot of technical changes here. So I don't want to, that was an opportunity, plus this was emailed around for feedback, so I don't want to dive into the minutiae of all of this today. But also special thanks to Councillors Bunting, Forsyth, Van Oosten, McPherson, Gallagher and Thompson for actually attending that. I think the discussion was really, really helpful.
I think I was there too.
Oh yes, sorry, Councillor Wilson, you were there. No, you are on my list.
We've known each other for 20 years. But
we have, yes. And actually, for those elected members that weren't here, that group really contributed I thought, some fantastic things to the submission, particularly strengthening our desire for to have a national education campaign, because that can cost a lot of money. So that came out in the submission. Our focus on the provision of future separated facilities for pedestrians and transport devices, that was another key thing from that group. Certainly, again, our push for funding in general, and advocating for, which was Councillor Wilson's great idea, advocating for the model to be pick up the aviation and maritime model on footpaths, which is uses fastest gives way to the slowest. So there were a couple of other things in there. Now, in Diligent, for those members that were at that fantastic workshop. The submission is under the HCC submissions with our tracked changes, just so we can see that staff have absolutely captured our responses. So thank you for that very much, Robin. So Robin, I'll just go to you for there was anything you wanted to particularly highlight, and then I'll go to questions of committee members. Robin, that's a lovely photo. Is she there?
Just trying to connect in.
Oh, is she?
She may be having email troubles.
Okay.
Oh,
there she is.
Take the mute off, it helps a lot.
Oh, okay. So, and Councillor Wilson's moving anyway, so that's good. And Councillor Bunting seconding.
Okay. So yeah, just quickly, thank you for the introduction, Councillor Angela. I agree that the biggest thing to make this work is going to be that really good comms and community engagement and making sure everyone knows what's happening. I think that it's also going to be critical that if we want to see a real increase in walking and cycling, then it's going to be very dependent on providing good, safe facilities. And while this proposal does look at improving it for cyclists, we need to make sure that it's not going to be at the expense of pedestrians. And really, we need to look seriously at what infrastructure we are providing out on our network. But I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks so much, Robin. So any questions? No, isn't that good? Oh, Councillor Petco.
Yeah.
And Councillor Forsyth.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks, Robin, for the report. I just wondered, and I'm sorry I didn't make it to the briefing, but in paragraph 31, how and who will enforce the rules? And you know, I'm raising this because earlier in the week or week before last, I did raise about the increased traffic and the increased cycle traffic on walkways, and that's been occurring over the lockdown period. What sort of enforcement will come into place if this all goes ahead around those shared spaces?
So there's no specific information given in the proposal about who would enforce, but that would typically be the New Zealand Police, because they're moving vehicle violations in inverted commas. And I guess that's part of the reason why we have raised the issue that it is going to be very behaviour dependent and getting that good training, because the reality is it's not going to be something that has a high level of enforcement able to be provided.
Right, okay. So it's really early days. We've got a whole bunch of rules around what motorists and cars can do, but we will need to develop over time rules around, you know, particularly motorised cyclists and buggies and lime scooters and all of those sorts of things, what rules might eventually come into place around those particular modes of transport.
So those requirements are fairly much outlined in 31, which is around that courteous and considerate manner, those sorts of requirements. We've also suggested that give way to the, keep left is also an applicable one that could be included in here. And Councillor Ewan suggested at the workshop that picking up from the maritime and aviation sort of ruling, where he who travels fastest also is required to give way to the slower ones, would be a good sort of philosophy that gets added into there. This piece of work has been some sort of 4 or 5 years in the planning at a national level in various working groups. And I think fairly much that once this goes through, it will be probably the end of any new stuff that comes out for quite some time.
Should we be advancing the requirement for a bell or a similar device on some of these, I use the word vehicle, but as a means for alerting
It's in there, Rob. It is in there. That was one of the things that the group was quite strong on.
My apologies, I must have missed that. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Right, thank you. Councillor Forsyth.
Going back and reading the docs, forgive me, I just sort of flip between the two, but I just do have a question around, I'm going to find the appropriate page. It's around cycle safety and on the road and the use of these sheds, the cycle paths. So we had a definition at the start around footpath, shared paths, cycle paths and cycle lanes. And that if I understand correctly, that a cycle path, which is on road and segregated, could be used by pedestrians as well if there's not a footpath, and with a speed of up to 50 k's. So my concern around that is around pedestrian safety, but also cycle safety, and that what sort of situation are we potentially encouraging when we have pedestrians walking in a cycle lane, which is on road, where cyclists can travel up to 50 k's an hour, and those cycle lanes, they're very narrow, and even in the context of social distancing, that's going to be impossible to achieve as well. So my concern is around encouraging pedestrians to be walking in a cycle path when there's no alternative for them to walk on a footpath or a shared path. So how are we able to mitigate that or avoid that?
So I guess in the first instance, it would be a reasonably rare occasion where we have a situation where we don't have a footpath, or a shared path, but we do have a cycle path in place. So it's not going to be a common occurrence. There is the ability through the proposed land transport rule for for path and road margins 2020, which is the new rule that's being proposed. There is the ability for the road controlling authority to set speed limits on those paths. So if we did end up with a situation where we were actually looking to have pedestrians use a cycle path, then there would be the ability to limit that speed limit down. But I think in the first, that would be a temporary measure while you're trying to provide an alternate facility for the pedestrians, would be my recommendation as to the approach that we would take.
Okay, thanks. That makes a lot of sense, because it is a bit counterintuitive when we're trying to provide fit for purpose infrastructure, and we're getting cyclists off footpaths and putting them on roads and then encouraging pedestrians to go back on them. I just think we're setting ourselves up for conflict. And I pinpoint that because having used the Claudelands Bridge cycle path, I've seen mobility scooters and pedestrians walking in those lanes as well. So I don't think they're as rare as what we might imagine them to be. They're actually happening here and now. And as I mentioned, when we're going forward into a lockdown 3 or lockdown 2, and we need to be practicing social distancing, that ain't going to work.
Okay.
So there's potential for some widening opportunities for us there. And I think it also, in the discussion that I had with you this morning, I'm thinking about the safety of the most vulnerable on the roads, in particular cyclists v bus or v truck. And we all are acutely aware of what the outcomes of those sorts of crashes are. And I noted that there were some specific allowances for buses in that, and I can't remember which section it was, but where if a bus is indicating for 3 seconds, then it has the right of way to pull out, or a vehicle following a bus at a bus stop would basically give the bus right of way. Understand that. But if we were to take that kind of principle a step further, and from a safety point of view, I think when buses are turning left, or trucks are turning left, that they give way to cyclists or more vulnerable road users, transport devices, and that really avoids that situation where a bus or truck turning left collects the cyclist.
Councillor Forsyth, sorry to interrupt, but I'm really struggling to work out what your question is. Or you're just...
How do we, in the in our submission, how do we look after cyclists when they're on the road with buses? Tuning left.
Yeah. Okay. So I think there's a couple of scenarios where this comes into effect. So one was in regards to the final proposal, which was about giving buses greater priority when pulling out.
Yes.
And that certainly is going to be an education component. And I think ongoing education around all licensing types, but particularly the heavy vehicles being bus and truck, will be a key requirement for any of these changes. And that's something that we have included in our submission. There was the scenario where a cyclist could move up through an intersection through a left turn lane and sit at the front of that. And that was one where the submission from council at this stage basically says we don't know about supporting that. We've expressed our concerns with regard to the ability for drivers of those large vehicles to actually be able to see the cyclist who may be legally in the right spot, but if the driver of that large vehicle can't see them, particularly for trucks that have those big engines and big noses out the front, then there is a very high likelihood of the cyclist getting clipped. So that was one that we've raised as an issue and said actually we'd like to see some more research done. And we don't think that that should be implemented until a lot of the education and behaviour change has actually happened to make people far more aware of cyclists and I guess respectful of their bubbles that they need to keep safe. We also disagreed with the proposal to have a 1.0 passing space in locations where the speed limit was less than 60k and promoted a 1.5 for all locations. But I think probably most importantly, there was a proposal for a stepped approach towards vehicles who are turning into a side road, giving way to pedestrians and cyclists. And it was suggesting that there would be a marking of 2 parallel white lines put down. And if that was in place, then the turning vehicles had to give way. And what we have said in our submission is we don't think that there should be a stepped approach. We think it should be in all situations, and that again, that there needs to be really good driver education around that. And then we also need to look at our infrastructure to ensure that we're making that very clear. And I look at the likes of the Wairere-Huntington intersections where I think we probably need to look at something like a raised safety platform across the Huntington to cater better for cyclists, so that that actually is a more continuous facility, but it also raises the awareness of vehicles turning into there. It slows them down and makes them more aware of the fact that there's going to be people coming through who have the right of way.
Thank you, Robin. Look, I'm just afraid we're going to get right into the minutiae again, and we had over 2 hours on this the other day, so I don't want to do that. I'm going to go to Councillor Wilson.
Very quick question, Madam Chair. In light of the current known limited police resources in terms of enforcement, and Councillor Bunting's timely reminder, our top priority must always be the safety of our citizens. What would we need to do to enable our city safe police force enforce these accessible street regulations?
I don't know. I think that would be something at a very high level, which would have to allow for that delegation, because we don't, and the same for our parking enforcement team, they don't have the delegation to deal with what's described as moving vehicle violations at this stage.
So we wouldn't have the ability to create, we wouldn't have the legislative framework to create a bylaw?
No, I don't believe so. I think it's a legislative requirement that would have to be done through the Commissioner of Police or something like that, but I'm really not certain on that.
Madam Chair, because I don't want to take any more time, it may be of some interest to try to get a legal opinion at some later stage as to what our ability is, in light of the fact that we spend a lot of time and resources creating these things, and there's clearly, or potentially, if staff's commentary is correct, absolutely no way of enforcing them.
And Councillor Wilson, you raise a continual issue for us when, and certainly something I've banged on about for years, when government change legislation, and they've done it with alcohol and they did it with psychoactive and all of these things, they change it and then they dump all of the costs onto us. So I think the wider issue is certainly something that's should stay top of our mind.
And don't let us then enforce it.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so this has been moved by Councillor Wilson, seconded by Councillor Bunting. Any debate? Councillor Wilson, did you want to say anything as the mover?
No.
Wonderful. Councillor Bunting is a seconder?
Not a thing, thanks.
Excellent. Anyone else? Excellent. Right, we'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, please raise your hands. I'm assuming that's going to be unanimous. Yes. Yeah, any opposed? No, no one's opposed. Okay, I think the next one is a contract as well. We're 6 minutes away from 1 o'clock. The PM's usually a couple of minutes late. Probably best to stop now. And if we just go, I think if we just take her 15 minutes, we're going to get the guts of what's in level 3 and level 2. That sounds okay. So if we come back, have a lunch break, come back at 1:15 to deal with the last 2 items actually, because the General Manager's report usually has a bit of discussion. So is everyone okay with that? It's a short lunch break. Are we nodding? Yep. All right, cool. So 12:15. Thank you.
Thank you.
to get through anyway. So we're on item 11. I do just want to ask committee members, I noticed in the report there's the word local a bit, and we have been talking about in the COVID life that we find ourselves in about local when we're talking about contracts, but I understand the Chair and Deputy Chairs of Finance and Economic Development are looking into that. So can we park that and wait for that discussion to come through that way and not have that local discussion here today? So with that, I'll turn it over, I guess, to Jason, if he's on the call. Lisa, is he here? No.
No, he's not there, but I can...
So if you pick it up,
I can start it.
Thank you.
So the purpose of this report is purely a process matter in terms of an extension of a contract that's already been approved. So what that extension that was discussed at a briefing on the 11th of March pre-COVID in terms of the details around this item at a briefing where we responded to a number of questions, particularly around service levels and key performance indicators for the Infrastructure Alliance in our roading area, which we advised that those will be addressed through the 10-year plan process, which was meant to be a few weeks later, but unfortunately has been delayed. So in terms of, this is just the final 3 years of our Infrastructure Alliance contract, where we're needing council delegation to approve that extension. The dollar figure has been put at an additional $100 million, and those numbers are pretty large, but those numbers are already within our 10-year plan, so we're not actually asking for any more funding. It's just an allocation of contract sum so that we can actually do the work required. In terms of anticipation of Māngai Norm's question, I'll be the first to admit that and acknowledge we have a lot of improvement to make in the cultural considerations area, particularly in the transport space, and it's something that we're actively trying to improve and learn more on so that we can develop that in our reporting. So in the transport space, it is one that we're wanting to really launch into and know that there's a lot of improvement in that space to really understand what that means, and the impact that we can have. So Jason's now online.
Okay. Eva Lisa, we had a briefing on all of this, didn't we? So
absolutely.
Yeah, so just reminding everyone that we did have that briefing a little while ago on the whole Infrastructure Alliance package and how it works.
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I'm happy to second that.
Can I just, if I can, through the chair, with the roading stimulus packages that have been submitted, particularly around the transport roading stimulus package, for the it is for the, I had it written down, it was the MB1 for the Waikato Regional Proposal for the Road Corridor Projects for Employment. We submitted that on the 23rd of March, and Hamilton's portion of that was $65.4 million, which included operations and maintenance and capital project works. So we're yet to hear back from central government whether that funding proposal, whether we've been allocated any funding. So in terms of an addition of a note.
Yes, so elected members, if Amy can just, when that's typed up, share the screen. So Eva Lisa's adding to the amendment in E, just to pick up that what she's just talked about from the funding from central government. So basically, if it comes through, that we're taking that into account. So Amy will do that in a moment for us. Thank you very much.
So this will ensure HCC is ready. It allows us to be agile and has the ability to quickly deploy and deliver on the roading stimulus package that we submitted, which I think is a real plus for Hamilton City at this time, which means that will come back to council to see what that is.
Yeah, that's great. Any questions, committee members? No? No questions? Okay, so that's been moved by
yes.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't see the whole screen. Councillor Thompson.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of questions. So just, I guess there wasn't much in the anything in the report around impacts of COVID and just whether that changes anything. So I was just interested in, for example, if we have to change the amount that we're spending due to budget reasons or stimulus reasons and things, how easy can this total amount flex? And also similarly, if we're looking at prioritising spending in different ways in order to take advantage of, say we get funding for putting in bike lanes, and so we have to look at restart shuffling some of our other transport corridor work. How does that also fit in?
So what this report is approving is the total contract sum that allows our Infrastructure Alliance to complete work, and that work's already included, as you indicated, in the 10-year plan. So it's actually about renewing the roads and things that we already have. How that happens and any enhancements to that, like improved cycleways, can all be considered by elected members, and then this contract sum allows us the ability to implement those quickly under a contract that we already have in place.
Yeah, and just in terms of that overall amount, so it can easily go up, or if there was issues, then it could be reduced as well. Like, are there consequences around that?
It's a contract sum, so every year that total is actually worked through and reviewed and reported through council, through the finance committee, in terms of how our spend against our budgets is going. And so if it is that provisional sum to allow us for the contract, just like Chris's contract conversation in his previous report, it doesn't mean that we're going to spend $100 million, but it may also mean that we have the ability to really look at how we spend it and have it spent as efficiently as we can in our roading network. Yeah, understanding there is subsidy attached also to the spend for transport.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, I just really wanted to know that it's flexible enough that if priorities change in what we're doing in that transport corridor, and whether it's we're putting in cycle lanes or focusing on more of the other renewals or maintenance projects, there's that ability to move things like that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Petco?
Just one quick question, Chair, and that is, given the size of the spend, does this require a recommendation to council, or is this a complete decision for this a complete final decision for this committee?
My understanding, because it's under delegations in the terms of reference for this, it's already funded within the 10-year plan. Therefore, this committee has the delegation to approve the contract sum.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, I've just had a message from Councillor Gallagher, who's can't get in. So Amy, can you help him get back into the meeting, please? Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Councillor Wilson, did you want to debate?
No, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else feel the need to debate? No? Great. All right, all those in favour, raise your hands. I'm assuming that's going to be everyone. Anyone opposed? No, that's carried. Wonderful. Okay, we're on to our last report, committee members, and as I always do, we'll work through these. Now, there are no decisions here. This is just for chit-chat, I guess, and for information. So we will start with, let me find the, it's in front of me here, Vision Zero update. Now, this was an action that came out from our last committee as well. Some elected members asked for this. So, Eva Lisa, are you talking to that, or Robin?
So I have Robin online, should there be any questions. So the staff action was to clarify the calendar date for the Vision Zero in terms of a calendar versus financial date. And so hopefully that's been answered in point 5 of
Yeah, and I think just before we go to questions, if there are any on this, again, any substantive discussion wouldn't work here because we don't have all of the information. But if that is something that people want to have a session on, again, I'm happy to set that up. So any questions just on the staff report for the Vision Zero update? Councillor McPherson. You're on mute, Dave.
Someone turned me on. Remotely, I can be turned on remotely and off.
Dave.
That's what I'm really worried about. We're on item 11?
Yeah, no, item 12, GM's report.
Oh, shit.
Oh,
Okay.
Pardon.
Yeah, I know, unparliamentary language. Okay.
Right. We're just on Vision Zero, and I just said let's not have a huge discussion on the strategy around Vision Zero. But happy to organise a workshop if people wanted that.
Sorry, come back to me. I do have a question.
Okay.
Sort it out.
Okay, sure. So anyone else with a question on the Vision Zero part of the GM's report? I can come back to you, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you. Do we have a greater break, like just if any elected members are interested, a greater breakdown of those statistics and kind of in terms of location or gender or age and that kind of stuff, just to understand if there's any trends in what we're seeing?
Yes, we can provide that. So basically all of the crash data that we use has gone into a central database called the Crash Analysis System, or CAS, and I've got a report for that. So it has the details of every crash, where it is, what time of day, etc.
Right, yeah, okay, cool, thank you. I might follow up at some point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McPherson?
Yeah, excuse me. The table at the top of page 133 was really handy, but just to put it in context, I see, for instance, 5 cyclists versus 18 drivers of vehicles during the same period. What's the proportion of road users? It doesn't you can't really compare apples with apples unless you can see that as a proportion. I suspect that the 5/18 is far too high for cyclists, but I don't have the background to prove that.
Okay, yes. I'll have to have a see in what we can do, because certainly we've got good understanding of vehicle numbers out there, a reasonable idea around cyclists, but when it comes to pedestrians, we don't have good data. But I'll have a see what I can.
Yeah, it's more like it for the next time, Robin. Yes, I don't need that right now. Yeah. Tomorrow.
We're not having another one of these tomorrow. Any other questions on the Vision Zero part of the GM's report? Councillor Gallagher.
Yes, I'm asking that the minutes record, because at the end of the 3-year cycle we get noted for absence, that where a councillor has genuinely attempted to enter a room, the virtual meeting chamber, and has been prevented from doing so, it should be recorded, because it's well, I have not popped out.
No, you haven't.
You guys all locked me out, so I've now managed to break down the virtual reality door and get back into the chamber.
Martin.
Thank you.
And you know my strong feelings on how we record attendance, so that
yes,
works
I
coming
do.
back
As long
to
as
us.
that I have cover, I'm happy.
Yes,
Thank you.
I've got your back, Martin.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to the Waikato Regional Council, Regional Transport Committee. Actually, there's nothing there to move on. As you can see, there were no meetings. So the Regional Connections Committee, and this is myself, Councillor McPherson, Thompson and Wilson who sit on this, and Councillor Gallagher frequently attends these meetings as well. So we'll go to questions of the report, but I'll just whip round those members. It was quite a good meeting. I won't cover everything because I want to leave stuff for the others to say, but I think this is where we first heard the term mode shift from NZTA, and we all pounced on that and put forward a motion that you can see in here, that our staff work on that with NZTA and WRC. And also we are really supportive of the east-west proposed bus route. I don't know what that looks like in a COVID world, and that's in there as well. And this committee can certainly expect to get more oversight on that. But I'll go to Councillor McPherson first. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
Probably only, Angela, thanks, that a number of the routes for passenger transport involve improving them, involve changes on NZTA corridors, which is a challenge all in its own right. We took 10 years, for instance, to get cycle ray on Lincoln Road because it was a state highway. So they are not yet able to move as nimbly as we can. We worry about how nimble we are, but NZTA's light years behind. So that's a challenge on top of our other challenges.
Yeah, that's a good point. Councillor Thompson, did you want to add something from that committee?
Not at the moment, though I'm excited to see where the mode shift plan work has got into, because I understand that was foundation for the 20-minute city proposal. So well done for all the work on that. It sounds really exciting.
Councillor Wilson?
Only to say that I'm looking forward to seeing how Chairman Russ Remington and Councillor Angela Strange finds the extra funds required to implement some of the things we're wishing for.
And our last, as it says here, our last regional connections committee meeting was going to be specifically to workshop the east-west new proposed bus route named by Dave the Meteor, which is a cool name, I reckon, given the other ones. But unfortunately, lockdown had hit, and we just really talked about the response from the buses and what was going to happen here and stuff like that. So there was nothing else to add from there. Staff, did you want to add anything on that? Evelisa? No.
There is there's a workshop being planned for next Friday, the 24th of April, for the Regional Connections Committee. So hopefully that's in our councillors' calendars.
Will that be on the east-west?
I haven't touched base with Waikato Regional Council in terms of the agenda for that.
Yeah,
workshop.
okay. Yeah, it is in our calendar next Friday. Yeah, great. Okay. Councillor McPherson?
Thanks. Look, just on the east-west, on page 134, there's a couple of comments halfway down about east-west link alignment options. And it said one of the infrastructure requirements is completion of the Rotokauri PT hub. And so it's not 100% accurate, because that is one possibility for the east-west. Our council has floated another one, which was actually literally going to the west rather than the north, and potential of both, perhaps. So flesh that out a bit more, I think, Evelisa, to reflect that would help for the future.
Okay, we'll do. I'll take that.
Thanks.
So, thanks, Dave. So committee members, just on the Connections Committee staff reporting section, are there any questions? There are none. Okay, so the next, actually the last item on the GM's report is the update of the rail service. So before I go to questions, I'll go to Councillor Wilson, who is our council representative, to talk to us.
Yeah, look, happy to. I also wonder if Chris wants to add anything, but my quick summary, I gave you an update a week or so ago of some of the critical threats. I guess they remain, they haven't changed. I think it's fair to say our narrative is the minute COVID-19 level changes enables us to pursue this project, both in terms of infrastructural build, marketing and launch date, it will have our 150% focus. And we are not talking about a delay until next year, early next year. We're talking about launching a meaningful connection between the two great cities way before the end of this year that will underpin this region's attempt to rebuild and stimulate the economy.
Thank you, Councillor. Chris, did you want to speak to this part of the report?
No, I think Councillor Wilson has summed it up pretty well. So I'm just listening to the alert level 3. I'm hopeful that the contract will get back on site and we'll be able to understand the delivery data a little bit better.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So any questions on this part of the report? Councillor Petco and then Councillor Bunting and then Councillor McPherson.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of questions about the Rotokauri Transport Hub and the Frankton Railway Station upgrade. First one about the rail station upgrade at Frankton. While I'm sort of a little bit concerned that we're spending money on upgrading an asset that we don't and will never own, are there any surprises likely in terms of cost overruns for us on the Frankton Rail Station that you're aware of at this stage?
No, look, the only planned works are really minimal. It's some work on the toilets to make them disabled and better access into the toilets. At this stage, it will be some tidying up of the parking down there, but not substantial work. So it's fairly minimal work at this stage in scope.
So it's largely to where you thought the spend might have originally been, rather than.
I think the budget from memory for Frankton upgrade is something like $30,000. So I'm not expecting anything more than that.
Anything more than that? Okay, thank you for that. And the other question is around the Rotokauri Transport Hub, which of course is on hold, pending the lockdown starting to be removed. And I asked this question a little earlier, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but do you have any sort of idea what the COVID-19 shutdown is likely to cost us in terms of any substantial increase in the, I think we're up for about a $14 million net cost, aren't we?
Look, probably the same answer I gave before. It's just a little bit too early. I think it's emerging that the hard one to work out for us is going to be the cost because of productivity losses as we move into level 3 and maybe even level 2. So that's something that's a little bit ahead of us in understanding that. So we are taking a little bit of a cautious approach and engagement with contractors just to make sure we get an equitable sharing of costs.
Yeah, okay, thanks for that.
Councillor Bunting. Oh, sorry, Councillor Wilson. Sorry, Councillor Wilson, did you have something to add?
Yes, look, I'm sorry. Just as Council's representative, Rob, I do feel there is going to be some cost associated with both the shutdown and the startup, and I don't think necessarily it's going to be insignificant. So I think we have to prepare ourselves for that mentally. Second thing I would say, Councillor McPherson and I are continuing to fine-tune with Chris small aspects of the design of the toilet out at the new station, and that also has some cost implications. And so I don't want that question to go unanswered without me at least saying, I will update you at the minute I get a really clear understanding of the quantums involved, but I'm onto it.
Thank you, that's reassuring.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Bunting.
Cool, thanks for that comment on the toilet. It's always nice to have something to go on, Ewan. Hey, it probably is a question too, and it's just something I read recently. There was some disconsent from some parts of Māoridom about Tahuia. Has that all been, about the name, has that all been discussed and worked out now?
Chris, I'm happy to try to answer that, Chris, unless you want to.
No, go ahead.
My understanding is it was in the finer nuances of how they were engaged.
Ah, okay.
And there were multiple players in this that run the stretch from Hamilton to Auckland, and we may felt that we had spoken to the people we needed to speak to, and then we subsequently discovered actually even the way we spoke to them, we may have been able to improve our approach better, and then we missed some. So it's on those finer nuances. There's certainly nobody saying they don't want Te Huia, as far as I'm aware of, but they've challenged us to improve the way we communicate and engage, and we've taken that on board. Chris, I hope I haven't misled anybody with what I've just said.
No, I think that's exactly right. I think it's complicated on this project because it's a program of projects. Some of the projects cross sort of all sorts of boundaries. So it's about engagement with the right people for the program that stretches from Hamilton to Auckland.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yep.
Okay. And thank you. That's a really good answer. And secondly, with regards to the start date, etc., a lot of public transport operators are predicting that during this time of social isolation or social distancing, there might be some reluctance to get onto trains and buses and stuff like that. Has that been discussed with the group?
Not at any length, and a lot of that's because the lens of which we're seeing the world has altered very quickly, and our understanding of the time frame has probably also altered. But I think when determining the launch date and what amendments we might need to make to enable social distancing to occur, I think I'll be able to get you a much better answer to that.
Yeah.
I do think, as we've just heard today with level 3 right now, inter-region travel is not going to be something we're going to be able to do under level 3. But I'm mindful of that, and that will certainly shape our thinking when it comes to naming a date.
Yeah, it's kind of how long is a piece of string, isn't it, at the moment? I think
and we run the risk, Mark, and this would be the worst case scenario, that in fact we do really well on level 3, move to level 2 quickly. We enact a whole lot of strategies based on level 2, and somehow, somewhere, the system breaks down, and we're catapulted back into level 3, and we just rerun both costs of shutdown, start up, and start up, and that could be the new norm for the next 12, 18 months until we get a vaccination.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's good. Thanks, Ewan. That's great. Cheers.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McPherson.
Two things. One, just Ewan mentioned the working with the design of the toilets out, which seems quite minor, except for Bunty out at Rotakoti. But just to be clear, the reason that's happening is because of the proposal, which Ewan and I have strongly supported, that we ensure there's a fully accessible toilet up there, gold standard, if you like, after it was put to us by the disability community. So that's the reason, but it's still proposed to be within the overall budget prior to COVID-19 issues. The other question to Chris, though, is, and you touched on it, and Rob touched on the finances of it, but I'm interested in a staff perspective, maybe not just for the railway service, but for all of our outdoors transport construction sort of work. Is there a sense of whether it could all start under level 3 or to wait to level 2, or are you doing some work in that area so that we can get a sense when we can get back on stream and start the clock counting?
So a number of answers to those questions. So the industry is doing a powerful amount of work at the moment in terms of developing guidelines for how they work. So I've been interacting with Downers who we're close to through the Alliance, and they've been sharing with me some of their guidelines that they're putting in place and how they can safely work with the separation issues, etc. I think you will find a real mixture in our contract. Some activities will be able to be undertaken safely, and some may not be. I'm quite hopeful that on something like horizontal infrastructure, that you can have that separation. We've got a lot of machinery-based work and on the roads, etc. So I do know that we have a very enthusiastic industry to get back to work, and we'll be looking to put guidelines in place that allows them to be as productive as possible.
Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chris. Just on the topic of the accessible toilet, obviously, it would be great to have one in Rotakoti, but then when you get up to Auckland, what kind of facilities are there at the moment? And is there any way for us to be kind of, having discussions with Auckland Transport and things, so that, when for people who do need the fully accessible toilets, when they plan their journeys, there is that continuity?
Yeah, it's been quite challenging through the process to get them to let us stop at their stations, but we haven't really entered into the types of facilities at the stations. I know some stations like Puhanui, they're upgrading, so I would expect, I don't know, that they will be top quality services there. I can certainly find out more, Councillor, if they we've got close contacts with the Auckland team, whether they've got any upgrade plans themselves. It would be a stretch for us to tell them what we want in terms of facilities, but we can certainly ask that question.
Yeah, that would be good to follow up, particularly if they're putting in new facilities. Then at least encouraging them would be positive.
Just to be clear, your question relates to that step up from a disabled toilet to a fully accessible toilet at the highest level. That's your question?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, I'll find out and come back.
Just on that, just adding support to that query, Chris, because for the disability community, and Councillor Thompson and myself spent a day a little while ago meeting with a variety of stakeholders, but a majority of them from the disability sector, and the full journey does impede on their decisions on whether they're going to use a service. So I think it's really important. I'd be keen to find out what you find out as well. That'd be great. Councillor Forsyth.
Thank you. Just while we're on the subject of disability toilets, etc., do we have any facilities for nursing parents and mums so that they don't have to go to a toilet to change children, to breastfeed, etc., etc.?
That question's in relation to our build at Rotakari Transport Hub?
Yep.
Probably not, I would suspect, and unless it fits into the fully accessible toilet. So we've yet to make all of the decisions on the toilet suite. The only decision we've made is that there will be a standard disabled toilet. What we're working on with the governance group and our elected members in particular involved in that is that step up to an additional toilet. So we haven't thought of that in the discussions we've had, but we can certainly wind that in as we make the decisions over the next 2 to 3 weeks.
Yeah, thank you. I'd really appreciate that.
Okay. There are no further questions on this item. So the recommendation is just to receive the report. So I'll move that. Seconded by, first hand up, Councillor Wilson. I'm assuming this will be unanimous. So all those in favour? Yep. Any against? That's carried. Excellent. Thank you. So that's the public part of the meeting over and done with. Thank you very much. So I'll just wait to hear from governance when we have to public excluded, seconded by Councillor Bunting. All those in favour? Any against? That's carried. And then I'll just wait for governance to let